Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell a list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. And you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. From Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor's report to the Justice Department about the Russian interference in the election and Donald Trump's role in it. This is from the introduction to Volume 1, page 1. The Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. Evidence of Russian government operations began to surface in mid-2016. In June, the Democratic National Committee and its cyber response team publicly announced that Russian hackers had compromised its computer network. Releases of hacked materials, hacks that public reporting soon attributed to the Russian government, began that same month. Additional releases followed in July through the organization WikiLeaks, with further releases in October and November. In late July 2016, soon after WikiLeaks' first release of stolen documents, a foreign government contacted the FBI about a May 2016 encounter with Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had suggested to a representative of that foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications that from the Russian government, that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. That information prompted the FBI on July 31st, 2016, to open an investigation into whether individuals associated with the Trump campaign were coordinating with the Russian government in its interference activities. That fall, two federal agencies jointly announced that the Russian government, quote, directed recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including U.S. political organizations, and these thefts and disclosures are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. After the election in late December 2016, the United States imposed sanctions on Russia for having interfered in the election. By early 2017, several congressional committees were examining Russia's interference in the election. Within the executive branch, these investigatory efforts ultimately led to the May 2017 appointment of Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III. The order appointing the special counsel authorized him to investigate, quote, the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, including any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. As set forth in detail in this report, the special counsel's investigation established that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election principally through two operations. First, a Russian entity carried out a social media campaign that favored presidential candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaged presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Second, a Russian intelligence service conducted counter-intrusion operations against entities, employees, and volunteers working on the Clinton campaign and then released stolen documents. The investigation also identified numerous links between the Russian government and the Trump campaign. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. Below, we describe the evidentiary considerations underpinning statements about the results of our investigation and the special counsel's charging decisions, and we then provide an overview of the two volumes of our report. The report describes actions and events that the special counsel's office found to be supported by the evidence collected in our investigation. In some instances, the report points out the absence of evidence or conflicts in the evidence about a particular fact or event. In other instances, when substantial, credible evidence enabled the office to reach the conclusion with confidence where that happened. The report states that the investigation established that certain actions or events occurred. A statement that the investigation did not establish particular facts does not mean there was no evidence of those facts. In evaluating whether evidence about collective action of multiple individuals constituted a crime, we applied the framework of conspiracy law, not the concept of collusion. In so doing, the office recognized that the word collude was used in communications with the acting attorney general, confirming certain aspects of the investigation's scope, and that the term has been frequently invoked in public reporting about the investigation. But collusion is not a specific offense or theory of liability found in the United States Code, nor is it a term of art in federal criminal law. For those reasons, the office's focus on analyzing questions of joint criminal liability was on conspiracy as defined in federal law. In connection with that analysis, we addressed the factual question whether members of the Trump campaign, quote, coordinated, a term that appears in the appointment order, with Russian election interference activities. We understood coordination does not have a settled definition in federal law, federal criminal law. We understood coordination to require an agreement, tacit or express, between the Trump campaign and the Russian government on election interference. That requires more than the two parties taking actions that were informed by or responsive to the other's actions or interests. We applied the term coordination in that sense when stating in the report that the investigation did not establish that the Trump campaign coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The report on our investigation consists of 2 volumes. Volume 1 describes the factual results of the special counsel's investigation. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. The Judiciary Committee right now is discussing this whole, the Trump administration claiming executive privilege. But I think the biggest story of the day is the piece that Casey Michael published over at Think Progress and the New York Times. The Trump organization's problem with possible money laundering. I mean, if we look at, in the Republic of Congo, the ruling Sessoso Ngoesso family, heavily invested in the Trump International Tower in New York and hotel, the daughter of the longtime ruler of the Congo, moved millions through an American law firm, laundering money. Haiti. This was Trump's first money laundering deal. It was 1983 with Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier. He stole $1.6 million from Haiti and put it into a property in Trump Tower, New York. Azerbaijan, the former transportation minister, Zaya Mammadov, put money into the Trump International Hotel and Tower in Baku, Azerbaijan. Money laundering. Kazakhstan, former Kazakhstan official and oligarch Timur Kubaliev. Money laundering. His businesses signed on to help finance the Trump Tower Batumi, a planned enclave along Georgia's Black Sea coastline, former Soviet Union. Kazakhstan, investing in the Trump Soho, New York. The Philippines. The guy who's the special envoy for U.S. trade, hiding his money in the U.S. through Trump properties. Indonesia, Harry Tano, the vice presidential candidate, same deal. Over and over and over again, we're seeing that Donald Trump, who according to the New York Times, is just plain old flat out broke. I mean, he lost over $1 billion in 1985 money. I mean, this is almost $2 billion in today's money, and has, I think, been underwater ever since. And now we're starting to see why I think Donald Trump has been so freaky about his tax returns or any of his financial information coming out, because the guy is a failed grifter, and he has been living off cash flow and loans. I mean, he borrowed $300 million from Deutsche Bank, not only refused to pay it back, but sued them. This was about 15, 20 years ago, maybe 18 years ago. And in the meantime, I think he's been living on that $300 million. What does this mean for American democracy when you have a president who's a grifter and is vulnerable not just to blackmail, but to being bought by foreign governments? Russia was offering him $250 million a year in cash flow for $1 billion Trump Tower. Julio Rivera is on the line with us. Our old buddy Julio is the editorial director of Reactionary Times, a columnist with Newsmax, The American Thinker, and townhall.com. ReactionaryTimes.com is the website. You can tweet him at, oh yeah, it's Julio. Hey, Julio, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Tom.
So now that we know that our president is not only the grifter that we believed him to be, but clearly has been, laundering money for people since the 80s in order to finance the fact that the $400+ million, which would be over $1 billion in today's money, that he used illegal tax schemes to basically, steal from the American government out of his father's estate, has been just pissing this money away and ended up, bankrupt, what, 5 times? How do conservatives deal with this? The fact that this guy has been lying to you all along about his net worth, about his wealth, about, what his business acumen. What does it mean to you guys?
Listen, you know what it means to me? I'll sum it up to you in 2 words. Who cares? I mean, at the end of the day,
I care.
He's doing his job. Wait a minute. Let me finish, Tom. He's doing his job. An excellent job as president. He's been operating in the best interests of America.
Really? Please name one piece of legislation that Donald Trump has signed that's helped America.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said, please name one piece of legislation that Donald Trump has signed that, in the majority, helped people who are not in the top 1%.
The tax reform. I mean, the tax reform was
87% of those benefits went to the top 1%.
I actually put out a story on reactionarytimes.com on this. The very journalists that are hitting him consistently and saying that he's so bad for America and this and that. The average salary for a journalist in this country is about $45,000. And I did the comparison as far as how much, they were paying under the previous, tax rules versus the Trump tax rules. And they saved about 20% on their tax bill.
So this is your only argument, Julio, is that
they have to watch every penny.
Is that Donald Trump is wonderful because of the tax cut?
Reporters are being very disingenuous. They all got a raise last year because of Uncle Trump. So I don't want to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's it, right? That's the only thing he's done.
Not that. You look at renegotiating and attempting to renegotiate a lot of different trade deals that we have going on. Obviously, with
with NAFTA, he's saying no, we don't want environmental protections. No, we don't want labor protections. With this deal with China, actually, the whole trade thing is an area where I think he's doing it incompetently, but I agree with the spirit of it. But back to my original question, Julio, I don't see this guy. You
didn't have a question. It wasn't a question. It was just you're bashing him, and you want me to just start pulling out things that he's done that's positive for America. I can sit here for an hour and tell you all the positive things that he's done for America. This is ridiculous.
What I'm saying, Julio, is that when the guy who is the president, when the guy who's got the bully pulpit, when the guy who becomes the example for America is a racist, and now we're seeing racist incidents exploding, anti-Semitic incidents exploding, violence against people of color, Muslims and Jews exploding. He's setting that example. Exploding? When he's a grifter, he's setting that example. Now you got the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau coming out and saying, as these policies are throwing everybody into disaster, they're saying, oh, well, instead of allowing debt collectors to harass you once a week, we're going to let them harass you on an unlimited basis. This is the new rule that Mulvaney is coming out with. We have a grifter in chief. We got a bunch of grifters in his cabinet. Wilbur Ross at the top of the list, the guy that literally was called a grifter by Forbes magazine.
Listen, the fair debt. First off, let me just address the one because you're throwing 10 things out at me. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, commonly known as the FDCPA, allows for daily contact between debt collectors and debtors, but you have to do it under a certain way. You can't continually contact people.
Once you've talked to somebody, you can't talk to them again for a week.
One phone number once a day. There's rules. I mean, I come from that industry, so
right. You may try to call somebody once a day, but if you reach them, you have to wait a week before you do it again.
No, you don't. No,
yes, you do.
That's not true. That's not the FDCPA.
That's the law right now.
That's not what the FDCPA says. I know the FDCPA because I was a compliance officer for a collection agency. So, no, you're wrong.
Well, that's what the New York Times is saying this morning. But anyhow, my point,
the New York Times says
will you acknowledge that Mick Mulvaney, on behalf of Donald Trump and Mike Pence, are trying to make it easier for debt collection people to harass people who have debts?
It's not about harassment. Listen, I was
unlimited email, unlimited text messages. That's not harassment.
Getting the money that you're owed from people who owe you.
Unlimited email, unlimited text messages.
Somebody's head and said, you know what? You got to take this high interest credit card or loan. Nobody did said that. These people willingly signed into these contracts, and
Julio,
guess what? When it's time to pay your bill, you got to pay your bill.
Okay, yeah. Julio, let's get back to the original question, and because I really think this is a big deal.
Which original question?
The original question that we have now learned that the guy in the White House is a grifter, that he lied to us about his net worth.
You just want to. This is slander.
This is not slander. The guy is he pled guilty to fraud, Julio. He paid a $25 million fine for the fraudulent Trump University. He's a grifter. He's a con man. How can the Republican Party continue to defend a guy who is a confessed con man?
Listen, the fact of the matter is, the only thing that we can really judge him on as voters, and we have a big election coming up next year, which apparently all these mainstream media sources want to get ahead of it and try to, bash this guy in advance of the election. The fact of the matter is he's doing a great job as president. Listen, I'm not in love with everything that he's ever done, but, that's the essence of capitalism. There's some pitfalls and some negatives. They come with capitalism, but I'd rather have that than have a socialist system any day of the week.
So let me get this straight. The new standard for President of the United States in the Republican Party is we don't care if he assaults women. We don't care if he's an anti-Semite. We don't care if he's a racist. What women has he assaulted?
First off, wait a minute. Stop. What women has he assaulted?
Summer Zervos.
I'm going to pick this apart.
Summer Zervos. Summer Zervos. A judge just said her case can go forward. She's actually moving forward right now, just like was happening.
And you have evidence of this because you're saying it.
A court has evidence of it, and the court agreed with her.
That this occurred.
A court has evidence of it, and the court agreed with her. The court has evidence of it, and the court agreed with her. But in any case, I hadn't even finished my question to you. When we look at the fact that this guy,
for any stupid reason,
hang on, you've got all the, well, Trump is an admitted sexual assaulter. He bragged about it, but nonetheless, these are the new criteria. And when a Democrat is running for president, are you going to say, oh, well, if Bernie went to the Soviet Union when he was the mayor of Burlington because Moscow was the sister city, or St. Petersburg or whatever it was, that's okay? You're never going to again attack a Democrat for anything that they might have done in the past. Is that what you're saying? These are the new standards?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Presidents are just born like Minerva from Zeus's head?
All these arguments were already fought in 2016. He won. Get over it, Tom. And
in 2016, we didn't know that he was broke.
He wasn't broke.
How do you know?
Off, you don't even understand the way that this stuff works. He was reinvesting.
He's living off his cash flow
in his own businesses, playing the long game, buying out his partners in many cases because of his strong self-belief.
This is not what these taxes are showing.
And now that strong self-belief is the reason why he's worth $3 billion. So you're going to try to call a guy that's worth $3 billion broke? I mean, let me ask you
have no evidence he's worth anything, Julio. You have none.
No, yes, we do.
If if these
all across
Julio,
the world,
if these things are lies, there's a real simple solution.
At properties last night at the Trump International
If all these charges that Donald Trump is actually broke are actually lies, there's a real simple solution. Release your tax returns. Why won't he do it? What's he hiding?
But what's the obsession with the tax? Like, is that going to change?
I want to know if my president is vulnerable to being blackmailed by some guy from Azerbaijan or from the Philippines or from Russia. That's what I want to know. Has he been bought off by these international, basically this international mafia?
They get hurt because
and you don't care.
The mainstream media is going to paint these as Trump companies, and people are going to boycott these companies. So there's a reason why there's redactions in the Mueller report. There's a reason why Donald Trump has the right to not have to release those tax returns. And if he wants to invoke executive privilege on something like that, it's fine. If you can prove that he broke the law and you can subpoena...
If Bill Clinton had refused to release his tax returns, what would you have said?
What was that?
If Bill Clinton had refused... Oh, never mind. We're out of time. Julio, it's always great talking with you, my friend. ReactionaryTimes.com. Oh, yeah, it's Julio is the Twitter handle. Julio Rivera. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Julio, thank you for dropping by.
Hey, God bless, Tom. Always love being on.
Good talking with you. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Michael in Winter Haven, Florida. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Andrew Jackson got away with defying the Supreme Court in 1831.
Twice.
Pardon me?
Twice. He defied them on the Trail of Tears, and he defied them on the Second National Bank.
Right, and Nixon was asked to hand over tapes, and he did. But
not at first.
Now Trump's being asked to hand over some documents, and he's defying Congress. That's this step. If it gets to the Supreme Court and they do rule that he has to hand over these documents, could he do exactly what Andrew Jackson said and basically say, make me?
Yeah. Yeah, he absolutely can. And in fact, with the Second National Bank, well, actually with the Trail of Tears as well, in both cases, he not only said make me, but he went ahead and did what he was going to do anyway. And so did, by the way, so did Abraham Lincoln, although we were at war at the time. But Abraham Lincoln said, I am not going to pay any attention at all to Roger Taney, who was the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm not going to pay any attention to his ruling in Dred Scott. We are not going to acknowledge Dred Scott. And, so you've got two presidents, 3 different times who've defied the Supreme Court, and then, multiple governors and whatnot, particularly after Brown versus Board of Education. So, yeah, I mean, anything's possible, Michael. And frankly, what you've identified, I think, is the long game here that Donald Trump is playing, which is if he can throw this to the Supreme Court, then in all probability, we're not going to get a decision until after the election.
Where are the checks and balances then? It's only in theory then, right? We only have checks and balances in theory.
We only have checks and balances.
After this time that everybody...
Right. We only have checks and balances as long as the people in the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and the United States Supreme Court behave in a fashion that puts country above party. And in the Senate and the Supreme Court, so far what we've seen on numerous occasions, particularly, gutting the Voting Rights Act at the Supreme Court, obviously all the things that Mitch McConnell is doing in the Senate, Merrick Garland and everything else, they're putting party above country. That is not the definition of patriotism.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. Good to hear from you. Ed in Glendora, California. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you very much. I want to talk about the subpoenas that could end up in the courts. I've heard the analysts say that this could go well into the 2020 elections, and my proposal would be that when we're in a constitutional crisis, which I think that is what we're in right now, I think that there should be a special law or some kind of a statute the situations that the cases need to go into the courts immediately, at least within 30 days, at the most 60 days, and all other cases, depending upon what district is going to be hearing the case, that the cases in that district should be put on hold until this is resolved. This is absolutely crazy to go on with this stalemate for a year and a half or 2 years.
I absolutely agree with you, Ed, but, the fact of the matter is to do that, to change the rules like that, you would have to have legislation passed by both houses of Congress, signed by the president, and then reviewed by the Supreme Court. And that ain't happening any day soon. In addition, Eric Holder was held in contempt the exact same way that Jerry Nadler is trying to do it, only it was the Senate, as I recall. And, around Fast and Furious, he refused to turn over the paperwork. It took 6 years before the courts finally said that and frankly, I don't remember how they resolved it, whether it was in favor of or against Eric Holder, but it took 6 years before it was finally adjudicated. That's what Trump and Barr are depending on. Ed, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. So that we don't have dead air here on our nonprofit stream. Are we ready? Okay, thank you. Okay, months before evangelical leader Jerry Falwell Jr.'s game-changing potential endorsement of Donald Trump in 2016, Falwell asked Trump fixer Michael Cohen for a personal favor. Now, stop for a second in the Wayback Machine. This goes back to Donald Trump and his corrupt relationship with other corrupt oligarchs. In this case, the oligarch is Jerry Falwell Jr., who's the heir to a multi-million, perhaps multi-hundred-million-dollar fortune from his father, one of the most corrupt so-called Christians in my lifetime, Jerry Falwell, who said that 9/11 was caused by gay people. Remember that? And Pat Robertson was like, yep, sure enough, that's it. And they said this the day after 9/11, right? Gay people caused 9/11. This was God's wrath. Well, this is from the Miami New Times by Jerry Iannelli back in December of last year. It's pretty darn curious that Jerry Falwell Jr. recently admitted in court that he paid $1.8 million to a pool boy at Miami Beach's Fontainebleau Resort who had befriended the Falwell family. And you see a picture of this guy. He's like Adonis, right? He's a very good-looking young man with a big square jaw and, kind of Rock Hudson look. Falwell Jr. and his wife appeared to have simply befriended, in quotes, the then 21-year-old pool attendant. Keep in mind, Falwell and his wife in their 40s or 50s, whatever they are, while the husband and wife were staying at the ritzy Fontainebleau. They then welcomed the pool attendant into their lives, flying him around on a private jet, and even put up millions of dollars to help his business ventures. The guy's name is Giancarlo Granda. And in this court filing, Jerry Falwell, Granda is suing him. He wants more money from Falwell, right? And Falwell says, my wife and I provided a loan of $1 million for Alton Hostel's purchase of the Alton property. Later, my wife and I provided additional funds of approximately $800,000 for renovation. Now, what was the $1.18 million that Falwell gave the pool boy that he met at the Fontainebleau to buy? Well, according to Politico, it was, quote, a flop house that is, quote, gay-friendly, end quote. So I leave that, without comment. Obviously, I have no problem with gay people, but I do have a problem with hypocrites. So now, 6 months forward, well, actually, it was around that same time, actually. It was during the campaign. Months before evangelical leader Jerry Falwell Jr.'s game-changing presidential endorsement of Donald Trump in 2016, he literally, Ted Cruz announced his candidacy for president at Liberty University, but Jerry Falwell went with Donald Trump instead. Why? Because a couple months before the endorsement, Michael Cohen helped get some, quote, racy personal photographs buried. Cohen told Arnold, I actually have one of the photos. It's terrible. Cohen helped persuade Falwell to issue his endorsement of Trump's presidential candidacy at a critical moment just before the Iowa caucuses. Falwell subsequently barnstormed with Trump and vouched for the candidate's Christian virtues. Very interesting. What the hell's going on with this? It just gets weirder and weirder in Trump world. It's like grifter paradise. What do we do about this, and how do we, what are your thoughts on this?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
What does America do with a grifter president who is so broke that he's vulnerable to foreign influence? We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The special counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1. Any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote. Appointment order B2 covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in two subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other... Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The New York Times, of course, reporting, and we started, I mean, this was our starting point for our conversation with Julio, that over a 10-year period, Trump racked up, in today's dollars, $2 billion worth of losses. And these were actual losses. This is, or the majority of them were actual losses. He bought an airline from Eastern. It went bankrupt. He built a casino. He built a series of casinos. They went bankrupt. He's so corrupt that he can't get a casino even in Las Vegas any longer, which has been owned by the mob forever. I mean, it's like, this is how bad it gets. And by the way, this all started in '85. It was in '87 when he published Art of the Deal and said, I am the king. He was losing hundreds of millions of dollars at that time, or had lost. And it's breathtaking. And, you know, aside from the fact that Donald Trump lied to us, not just through the campaign, NBC lied to us when he was on The Apprentice, saying that he was a great deal maker and a successful businessman. He was a failed businessman. He would have been out of business over and over and over again if his daddy hadn't bailed him out. His daddy one time went to one of his casinos that was failing with millions of dollars worth of chips and just, you know, millions of dollars worth of cash, bought chips, walked off with the chips, and that was it. Okay, he converted several $1 million into little pieces of plastic. And Trump was able to keep his casino running for another month or 3. The guy has been lying. He was lying when he published Art of the Deal. He was lying when he was on The Apprentice, and NBC was lying to us about it. Although, you know, truth be told, they probably didn't realize the depths and depravity of Trump's lies. He was apparently lying to his banks and his insurance companies, at least according to his lawyer, Michael Cohen. And you know, he lies about assaulting women. It's just, how much longer do we tolerate this? David in Greenfield, California. Hey, and don't, isn't being a serial liar with 10,000 lies documented under your belt by the Washington Post, isn't that in and of itself enough to impeach somebody? David in Greenfield, California. What's on your mind, David?
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, I was curious why it is that the subpoenas are having such a hard time getting served. I understand the Sergeant at Arms can serve these subpoenas, and I would imagine he could take the help of, like, the congressional police and just go do what needs to be done.
I didn't know that there was any problem at all with service, David. Where'd you hear that?
Well,
I mean, the subpoenas are being ignored.
They're being ignored, right.
But that's different from not being served.
Why not just get a subpoena and go over to the IRS and get the documents?
Well, that's what they did. They requested them of the commissioner of the IRS, the head guy at the IRS. And he said, well, you know, I got to answer to the Justice Department, to the Trump administration. And the Trump administration says, no, I can't do this. So which means that it has to be enforced by a court, and so it'll start at the district court, then it'll go to an appeals court, and then it'll go to the Supreme Court, and that entire process, in the case of Eric Holder, took 6 years. In this case, all Trump needs for it to do is take more than 18 months.
Well, I don't understand why it is that the Sergeant at Arms can't go over and enforce it and just get the stuff.
Because the Sergeant at Arms only has police.
Policeman might go out and you serve a warrant.
The Sergeant at Arms of the House of Representatives and his equivalent at the Senate, they only have power within those buildings that are controlled by the House and Senate. I'm not even sure if that power extends to the office buildings, because I've been in those office buildings many times, and my recollection is it's TSA kind of people who are doing security there. I'm pretty sure the Sergeant at Arms only has authority over the Capitol building itself. So you'd have to have one of those guys, you'd have to have Bill Barr or whoever walk into the Capitol building before the Sergeant at Arms could try to arrest them. And it turns out that the so-called cell that they've got downstairs in the Capitol building has basically not been used as a cell probably since Matthew Lyon was stuck in it by John Adams in 1798, or 98 or 99, whichever year it was. And ever since the Lincoln assassination, it's been used to store basically sacred objects like the carriage that Lincoln's casket was carried on, and I think a couple of other presidents were carried on that same carriage. So, you know, it's not even a jail cell anymore. So I think that that's wishful thinking on pretty much everybody's part, David. We need to.
The Capitol Police already work outside of the Capitol building.
No, the Capitol Police are a different thing from the Sergeant at Arms and the police for the House of Representatives. I forget what they're called. The Capitol Police are a division, I believe, they're a division of the D.C. Metro Police, are they not? Or perhaps they're a division of the Secret Service, but they're federal police that have authority throughout the Capitol. You know, when I lived in D.C., I would frequently see cars go by that said Capitol Police on the side, and it was different from the D.C. Metro. But they drive around the city. I mean, that's different from the Sergeant at Arms in the House and Senate.
Well, I think that we should be able to adapt to the needs of our republic. And we have a lawless president that is not honoring subpoenas, and I think we should increase the powers of the legislative branch of government to go out and enforce these things.
Yeah, and it's going to take, you know, if the shoe were on the other foot, you can bet that the Sergeant at Arms would be being frog marched over to the White House to arrest Bill Barr, but you know. That ain't happening. I agree with your sentiment, David. I don't see the way for it to happen. Thanks for the call. Laura in Sebring, Florida. Hey, Laura, what's on your mind?
Oh, gosh. Where do I begin?
Yeah.
I watched the Nadler this morning trying to serve up Bill Barr, and I couldn't believe the way the Republicans were just sticking up for this lawless president. I mean, don't they know that everybody that did investigations on him were Republicans?
Yeah, here's what they know for sure, Laura. Virtually 100% of their donors, of the Republicans in Congress, virtually 100% of the millionaires and billionaires who are keeping them in office and are frankly the only reason that they're still in office, because they're the ones who are providing the super PACs that are backstopping these people in their elections and re-elections. 100% of those donors are happy with Donald Trump because of the tax scam. They're the ones who are the beneficiaries of this massive tax cut where we borrowed $1.5 trillion from our grandchildren and gave it to billionaires. And as long as the donor class is happy with Donald Trump, the Republicans, when the donors say jump, the Republicans will say how high.
Yes, but I have friends that are like me, struggling to pay my bills, living paycheck to paycheck, and they're Trump supporters. I live in Florida.
Yeah, I know.
And they're Trump supporters. And I'm like, why? I mean, he's not doing nothing for you.
Because he's got a propaganda machine. I guarantee you, Laura, those people either watch Fox News or they listen to right-wing hate radio. Because if you don't get your news from one of those two sources, it's obvious to everyone else in the country that the guy in the White House is a grifter, a con man, and a sexual abuser, an assaulter, a sexual assaulter. And I mean, it is beyond obvious. It is established. And yet, if you watch Fox News or if you listen to right-wing hate radio, you don't know that. And so, you know, I think the job you have is to educate your neighbors. Have them come over and watch our show. Have them call in and debate me. Laura.
That's right.
Laura,
but I'll tell you one thing. You got to admit, he's the dumbest president, too, of all time.
I think that may well be the case, Laura. I think that may well be the case. Thank you so much for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. Rick in Lexington, Kentucky. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Thanks for taking my call, Mr. Hartman.
Sure.
Congratulations on your conversation with Mr. Julio.
Thank you.
You were pretty passionate with your argument with him, and I enjoyed it very much. He's entitled to his opinion. He's an American. But I would say to him that I would like for him to have that same enthusiasm that he has going after indebted people or people that can't pay him, so he can harass them daily. If we could have that same enthusiasm for the people that are doing tremendously well, and for them to pay their fair share in taxes.
Yeah, you know, something like 20% of the staff of the IRS has been laid off in the last couple of years. I mean, it's the IRS is a shell of what it used to be. They no longer can afford to actually audit high net worth individuals. So increasingly, they're going after working class people.
That's the point I was going to make as soon as you made that point. This is what I would like to ask you. 90% of Republicans, 48%, half of white people support the president, okay?
Yeah.
My question to you would be, what would be going on in this country if publicly half the black people in this country, half the brown people in this country publicly supported Louis Farrakhan?
I don't know.
I'll tell you.
I mean, you mean for president?
No, just period. Just general
just supported him. Okay.
And Louis Farrakhan has no power whatsoever.
Right.
But the president of the United States, 90% of Republicans and half the white people in this country support the president. And not one time have I heard him introduced as bigoted or racist. You did a good job talking to Mr. Julio.
Yeah.
But my point to you is the young freshmen that are in the Congress, every time they're introduced now, socialism is in their name.
Sure. Yeah, here's the thing, Rick. What the Republicans know, the elected Republicans and the billionaire donors who keep them in office, what they know is that if the American people knew what their real economic agenda was, or for that matter, even their real social agenda, that, you know, to just wipe out all the so-called welfare programs from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, housing assistance, right down to things like fire and police and roads. They literally want to privatize all those things so that some billionaire can make a buck off it. That's what Betsy DeVos is trying to do with our public schools right now, and she's quite effective at it. She already privatized half the public schools in Michigan, whereas it's only 8% nationally. So if the average voter knew that that was their real agenda, the average voter, you know, you'd never see a Republican elected again. So what they had to do is put together a coalition. So they get a bunch of right-wing fundamentalist Christian cranks who believe that it's the end of the world, and therefore you don't have to worry about global warming because Jesus is going to come back and make all things new, as Watt said, during Reagan's administration. You get the Christian crazies, and I'm talking about Christian hypocrites, people like Jerry Falwell Jr., who in my opinion are not followers of Christ. You combine that with the white racists, which is probably about half the white population is sufficiently explicitly racist that they will vote for somebody because
I wouldn't go that far.
I will, and I'm a white guy. You know,
okay.
And I think it's about half, honest to God. And you see those numbers reflected with Trump. And then the sweetener on this is people who are worried about their job, their economic future. There actually is that cohort who want to see America adopt a protectionist trade policy that, by the way, has been the position of about half the Democratic Party ever since Bill Clinton, you know, went with all in for NAFTA. You still had half the Democratic Party at that time. Well, at that time, it was like 80% of the Democratic Party saying, no, don't do it. And now it's about half of the Democratic Party. So, you know, and Trump, you know, basically said, I'm going to pick those people up. And you put together this coalition of these three groups, and then you toss in the freaked out gun people, and boom, you've got enough to get 50% of an election.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Sure.
Can I ask you one thing? Okay, all of that you just got through saying, then how come you do a better than average job trying your best to educate, but I take in a lot of network news and cable news. How come nobody on TV is talking to those white people? I'm beginning to think white people is a bad word like the N word is because nobody says white people on TV.
Yeah. Well, it happens some, particularly on MSNBC, where they're more willing, frankly, to put people of color on TV.
I'm a big fan of MSNBC.
Yeah. It's
rarely hear that.
Yeah. Okay. You know, Joy Reid is particularly good at this, and so is Reverend Al. But the fact of the matter is that the big networks are owned by the same oligarchs that are supporting Donald Trump. I mean, you know, you had Les Moonves from CBS saying, you know, Donald may be bad for the country, but he's great for CBS. Please keep it up, Donald. They made him president. They made him the Republican nominee by giving him $2 billion worth of free time, you know, and most of that free time was his trashing people like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio. So, you know, you have to understand it systemically, and I'm sure you do, Rick. That's what's going on. Rick, thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. It's 48 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Exposing the con and conservative. We'll be right back with more of your calls after this. And welcome back. And Charlene in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Charlene, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. You know, you've been talking about Trump and his finances.
Right.
I don't know if you remember, but Nevada wouldn't give him a gaming license.
Yes.
They knew what he was up to.
Yeah, his hotel is one of the few hotels in Las Vegas that doesn't have a hotel-owned casino in it.
Right. So I guess they figured out what he was doing with his finances, and they didn't want him owning a casino. So.
Yeah. And now he and his family, his grifter family, have these top secret security clearances. It's mind-boggling. Charlene, thanks.
And they claim he ruined Atlantic City with his casinos after they went down. So.
Yeah, that may well be. I'm not an authority on that, but yeah, it makes perfect sense. Charlene, thank you for the call. Morris in Long Beach, California, listening on KPFK. Hey, Morris, what's up?
Professor, that's why Jesus said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." They're watching Fox News.
You're talking about the Trump voters.
It's amazing that there is a protective language for the president, isn't it? But I want to talk to you about this guy named Bruce McNall, who used to be the CEO of the Los Angeles Kings. He went out and got a loan application, and he lied on his loan application, so they put him in jail. Now, even though Steve Mnuchin may not release those tax returns, if y'all would follow my idea and get somebody over there to that congressional building and start arresting folks, we'd be able to get those paperwork, but I know folks ain't going to behave that way. No problem. The New York State, he got to file tax returns in New York. They'll give them to the House Ways Committee, no problem. Now, my big question is this to you, Professor. Now, give me a straight-up answer. Of the Democrats that are running, which Democrat do you think would pardon Donald Trump?
I don't think any of them would.
Remember that. I'll talk later, my brother. Thanks for taking my call.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Morris. Yeah, interesting question. But, I don't think it's going to happen. Mark in Woolley, Washington. Hey, Mark, or Valley, Washington. Excuse me. Mark, what's up?
Oh, I'm not sure if this would be a law or take an amendment, but I think that we need this we get through this Trump fiasco and the Democrats take control. We need to pass a law that if the president's being investigated, that the FBI and the special counsel has to answer to the Speaker of the House.
Okay. And how are you going to get that law past the Senate and signed by Trump?
Well, that's what I said if we get through this Trump fiasco.
Oh, I see.
But we need to do something to make sure that we don't have this collusion between the Attorney General and the President to where they can just do whatever the hell they want.
Right. So, the issue that you're addressing, Mark, and you're doing a really good job of it, I think, as one step forward, is the question that I raised a few days ago, which is when you look at the very real and lasting damage that the Trump presidency is doing to the idea of checks and balances in the United States, the damage it's doing to our republic. Not our nation, but our republic, to the infrastructure, our governmental infrastructure. The next guy who uses power the way Trump is using power may not be as much of a stumble bum as Trump is. And that's where it gets really dangerous. You get a Mussolini kind of figure in there. And I agree with you. We need to start having a serious conversation about how do we repair this country from the damage that Trump has done, and how do we close the holes that were always there in terms of presidential power that he has exposed. Mark, thank you. Excellent point. We'll be back. It's 52 minutes past the hour. Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com. and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, ThomHartmann.com. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And by the way, we have an underwriter for our program. It's called New Leaf Naturals, nuleafnaturals.com. And they sell CBD oil, which is legal in all states. And we're going to give away a bottle to the first caller who calls 503-954-2715 and mentions that they would like that bottle of CBD oil. So, picking up your calls, Jim in Scappoose, Oregon. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Hey,
Jim.
You're making a logical error here. You're assuming that we're playing on the same playing field, and you're assuming that we're fighting the same fight. We're not.
Okay. Explain.
You see, the Republicans have the government running the way they want it to run. They don't care how we want it to run.
Oh, I think that's fairly obvious, Jim.
Yeah, but I don't think the American people are hearing that message. You keep saying we're trying to fight a fair fight here, right?
I'm not sure that that's the case. I don't think that issues of fair or unfair are what are in people's minds, at least at the legislative level right now. I think that it's what's constitutional and what's unconstitutional, what's legal and what's illegal.
Okay.
And it's increasingly obvious that Trump is doing things and has done things that are illegal and is doing things that are unconstitutional.
But they don't care. You see, that's
no, I know that they don't care, and I think, and it's clear to the Democrats. I don't know if you heard the debate this morning between a number of members of the House Judiciary Committee and some the Democratic members and some of the Republican members. I mean, they were basically calling each other out.
Well, yeah, they're calling each other out, but you see, you're fighting two different fights. The Republicans are trying to set the government up the way they want it set up, and
they're trying to take it down, actually. But what's your solution to that, Jim?
The solution is the vote. And I've had this discussion with you many times, whether or not we have the right to vote. We need to claim that right. We need to reclaim it.
Oh, we need to codify it as law. And I would argue it already has been. In 1993, in the Motor Voter Act, the preamble to that act says voting is a right in the United States. Those exact words. And the problem is that it has never been taken before the Supreme Court to put their stamp of approval on it and say, yep, voting is a right. And frankly, I'm not sure that they would, given what they did to the Voting Rights Act.
You can't play fair in this, okay? You can't expect the
Well, how do you
law.
play unfair and win?
This is how. Exactly the same way the Republicans did the Second Amendment. They demanded that personal right to bear arms.
Oh, they got it from the Supreme Court. They got it from the Supreme Court. They got it from a corrupt decision that Scalia authored, quoting a 1700s anti-federalist in Pennsylvania as if it was, a debate about the Second Amendment. It was just, in fact, my book, The Hidden History of Guns, lays this all out. Jim, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. We're reading from the Mueller report. This is from Section 1, Part 1, and page 11. And this is from the part titled The Special Counsel's Investigation, which is describing the scope of it. The Special Counsel, the order stated, is authorized to conduct the investigation confirmed by then FBI Director James B. Comey in testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence on March 20th, 2017, including 1. Any links and or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and 2. Any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, and 3, any other matters within the scope of 28 CFR 600.4. Appointment order. Section 600.4 affords the special counsel, quote, the authority to investigate and prosecute federal crimes committed in the course of and with the intent to interfere with the special counsel's investigation, such as perjury, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and intimidation of witnesses. End of quote. The authority to investigate, quote, any matters that arose during the investigation, end quote, appointment order B2, covers similar crimes that may have occurred during the course of the FBI's confirmed investigation before the special counsel's appointment. Quote, if the special counsel believes it is necessary and appropriate, the order further provided, the special counsel is authorized to prosecute federal crimes arising from the investigation of these matters. Finally, the acting attorney general made applicable sections 600.4 through 600.10 of Title 28 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The acting attorney general further clarified the scope of the special counsel's investigatory authority in 2 subsequent memoranda. A memorandum dated August 2nd, 2017, explained that the appointment order had been, quote, worded categorically in order to permit its public release without confirming specific investigations involving specific individuals, end quote. It then confirmed that the special counsel has been authorized since his appointment to investigate allegations that 3 Trump campaign officials, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and George Papadopoulos, quote, committed a crime or crimes by colluding with Russian government officials with respect to the Russian government's efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential campaign, or election, end quote. The memorandum also confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate certain other matters, including 2 additional sets of allegations involving Manafort, parenthesis, crimes arising from payments he received from the Ukrainian government, and crimes arising from his receipt of loans from a bank whose CEO was then seeking a position in the Trump administration, close parenthesis. Allegations that Papadopoulos committed a crime or crimes by acting as an unregistered agent of the Israeli government, and 4 sets of allegations involving Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump. On October 20th, 2017, the acting attorney general confirmed in a memorandum the special counsel's investigative authority as to several individuals and entities. First, quote, as part of a full and thorough investigation of the Russian government's efforts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, end quote, the special counsel was authorized to investigate, quote, the pertinent activities of Michael Cohen, Richard Gates, redacted, Roger Stone, and redacted. Confirmation, quote, confirmation of the authorization to investigate such individuals, close quote, the memorandum stressed, quote, does not suggest that the special counsel has made a determination that any of them has committed a crime, end quote. Second, with respect to Michael Cohen, the memorandum recognized the special counsel's authority to investigate, quote, leads related to Cohen's establishment and use of Essential Consultants LLC to, inter alia, receive funds from Russian-backed entities, end quote. Third, the memorandum memorialized the special counsel's authority to investigate individuals and entities who were possibly engaged in jointly undertaken activity with existing subjects of the investigation, including Paul Manafort. Finally, the memorandum described an FBI investigation opened before the special counsel's appointment into allegations that then Attorney General Jeff Sessions made false statements to the United States Senate and confirmed the special counsel's authority to investigate that matter. The special counsel structured the investigation in view of his power and authority to, quote, exercise all investigative and prosecutorial functions of any United States attorney, end quote. Like a U.S. Attorney's office, the special counsel's office considered a range of classified and unclassified information available to the FBI in the course of the office's Russia investigation. And the office structured that work around evidence for possible use in prosecutions of federal crimes, assuming that one or more crimes was identified that warranted prosecution. There was substantial evidence immediately available to the special counsel at the inception of the investigation in May 2017 because the FBI had, by that time, already investigated Russian election interference for nearly 10 months. The special counsel's office exercised its judgment regarding what to investigate and did not, for instance, investigate every public report of a contact between the Trump campaign and Russian-affiliated individuals and entities. The office has included its investigation into links and coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Certain proceedings associated with the office's work remain ongoing. After consultation with the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, the office has transferred responsibility for those remaining issues to other components of the Department of Justice and the FBI. Appendix D lists those transfers. I would add 12 of the 14 are redacted. So this is reading from the Mueller Report, Part 1, Section 1.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
The Mueller Report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I want to talk about the economy. We've been talking about Donald Trump being a grifter. I have been saying for, I think about a year now, that I think that he's actually broke. I think he's been broke since the 90s. I think he's been living off cash flow and borrowed money. He goes to Deutsche Bank and borrows $400 million. And then when they say pay it back, he sues them. And then they say, okay, you don't have to pay it back. By the way, here's another $1 billion. And, if you're living, he's living large, right? But how much does it cost to live large for him and his family, the whole Trump crime family? There's 5, 6, 8 of them, where they include the little kids and all this kind of stuff. You can live large on a couple $1 million a year. You can live real large on $3 or $4 million a year. You can live super large on $10 million a year, even an entire family like that. I mean, if you're going to spend $1 million a year, that's, in the neighborhood of $80,000 a month, if I'm doing my math right. And, $80,000 a month is in the neighborhood of $20,000 a week. And for $20,000 a week, you can get a lot, right? So I'm of the opinion that Donald Trump has always been a grifter. He was stealing money from his father's estate. His father was giving him some, and he was also stealing some, or at least, some of the reaction or some of the interactions were rather dicey. His sister was apparently collaborating with him in this because, as a federal judge, she just resigned a couple of weeks ago to avoid being investigated after the New York Times laid out how this illegal tax fraud scheme worked, where Trump was taking money from his father's estate, hundreds of millions of dollars, and delivering it into his own pockets and those of his siblings in ways that were in open and naked violation of the U.S. tax code. But now we've got another situation here. Donald Trump is, promoting this. The economy's just wonderful. Everything's great. Right. We've actually seen the workforce over the last 4 months, the workforce participation rate, the number of people who are actually working as a percentage of the population, has been declining. Now, there's a number of possible reasons for this. One is that a lot of these people are losing full-time jobs, and they're getting gig jobs, so they're still considered working in some numbers, but not in others. You know, they're working at Uber. But Uber's went on strike today, by the way, you know, as a way of demanding basically recognition as workers, decent pay, some transparency, all this kind of stuff. So, number one, you've got that. Number two, you'll recall one of the big things that really drove us into the crash of 2008, the last, you know, the Bush crash, in addition to Bush's tax cuts, but and in large part as a consequence of the year 2000, or maybe it was 99, repeal of Glass-Steagall. Excuse me. One of the things that really drove this was that lenders, on the assumption that the price of real estate would always go up, lenders started loaning people money, particularly businesses, but also, you know, real estate, residential real estate, started loaning people money on a interest-only basis. In other words, somebody wants to buy a house for $200,000, say, and they can't afford the payments, the monthly payments on a $200,000 mortgage, but they could afford the interest part of that payment. Typically, the interest is like, you know, 10, 15% of the total payment. Well, it depends on where you are in the life of the loan. Obviously, it's like 90% early on, and it's like 10% on the back end. But in any case, they were doing interest-only loans. And, you know, why would a lender do an interest-only loan? Because the whole point of lending is to eventually get paid back the principal. The reason that they would do this is they assume that the price of the property is going to continuously go up forever. And as a result of that, you know, eventually the added equity will be there, and the person who bought the house will sell it or flip it or whatever, or refinance their loan in a way that allows them to pay back the principal. But this is a really dangerous thing when you start seeing the majority of the loans being made being interest-only loans. It means you are in what Hyman Minsky referred to as the Ponzi phase, the third phase of an economy, the phase just before the collapse. So consider this. In the first 3 months of this year, and I got this from Chuck Miller's newsletter this morning from Aiden Forecast, in the first 3 months of this year, 77% of all new loans for commercial real estate were interest-only loans. This, you know, Trump's managed, and then this is what I wrote this morning for our Facebook meme, as it were, or, you know, a little quote. Trump's management of the economy has been similar to the way a cocaine addict keeps on functioning. Periodic jolts, in this case it's tax cuts, low interest rates, military spending. Periodic jolts of stimulus, continuously stronger and stronger. And any of you who lived through the 80s, we all saw this, and somebody that we knew, right? And just a little more cocaine, just a little more cocaine, just a little more cocaine, just another day without sleep. And then what happens? After 2 or 3 days of no sleep, they just crash and burn. They melt down, they freak out, they go nuts, or they just sleep for 2 days. And that's how Trump is running our economy right now. That's how the Republicans are running our economy right now. And then on top of that, they've got this new plan. By the way, we have a winner in our free CBD oil giveaway. Our winner is in Iowa, did you say? Idaho. That's cool. I'm not going to name them on the air, but congratulations. And so this is from New Leaf Naturals, one of our new sponsors. In any case, this is the scam that they're running. And now that we've got 10 years of taxes, of Trump's tax information from the 80s and the early 90s, we know that he lost more money than any other wealthy person in America. He bought an airline, it went bankrupt. He bought a vodka company, it went bankrupt. He started a university, or he started a school back then, another school, it went bankrupt. He started, you know, pretty much everything he did. Casinos, they went bankrupt or out of business. He literally lost, in today's dollars, about $2 billion. Now, I don't think that back in the 90s he had $2 billion. And I think that he's borrowed all that money to keep his lifestyle going. I think that the reason why Donald Trump is hiding his tax returns, the reason why he told Mitch McConnell it was a higher priority to put his guy in as the chief counsel, the lawyer for the Internal Revenue Service, that was a higher priority than getting the Attorney General of the United States in, was because he knew that this guy would protect his tax returns. It's why he put a crony in as commissioner of the IRS, a guy who used to work for Trump. He would protect his tax returns. Well, what is in his tax returns? And I ask you this question. What do you think is in Trump's tax returns that he is hiding so aggressively? What is he hiding? And what are all these Republicans working to help him hide? I personally think it's the fact that he's broke. I also think it's that he has been so broke that he's been willing to get into, and basically I don't think this is driven by being broke. I think he started life this way. I think this is a business practice he inherited from his father. But I think the other thing is that he's perfectly willing to launder money for some of the most evil people in the world. These oligarchs who ripped off. In '83 was one of his first big money laundering schemes for Papa Doc Duvalier, who hid his money in Trump Tower, bought real estate in Trump Tower to money stolen out of Haiti. So, the Democrats in Congress, they're looking at it going, hey, this guy's committing crimes. He's been doing money laundering for 40 years now? And yeah, I get that. But I think the thing that he's desperately tried to hide is the fact that in '87, when he wrote The Art of the, or when Tony, wrote The Art of the Deal, and Donald Trump published it, he was 2 years into losing literally hundreds of millions or $100 million a year. He was broke. But he needed to revive himself as the captain of industry, as this great guy who understands how things work. And so he hired this ghostwriter, and he published The Art of the Deal, and everybody was like, whoa, this guy is cool. He's really a big shot. And he continues losing $100 million a year for the next 8 years. And we don't know how much he's lost since then because we only have his tax returns up to the mid-'90s. And I think this is why he's trying to hide his tax returns. I think Ivanka is broke. Kushner is obviously living on borrowed money. He went over to the Middle East to borrow $1 billion to prop up his 666 Fifth Avenue building. And the Qatar government, which is the largest investor in this huge wealth fund, turned him down. And immediately you had Qatar being blockaded by Saudi Arabia, by Mohammed bin Salman, Jared Kushner's buddy. And the blockade continued until they finally said, okay, cool, we'll give Kushner $1 billion. They gave him $1 billion, and within a week, the blockade was gone. In my opinion, that's probably the most egregious and obvious crime that this administration has committed. But it's just an example of the kinds of things that we will find out about. Now, we won't find out about that because that's Kushner, and we need to see Kushner's tax returns too. But this is the kind of thing that we're going to find out when we look at Trump's tax returns, in my opinion, is that he's broke. Kushner's broke. They're all underwater. The whole Trump crime family, they are grifters. They are living large on interest, on money that they have borrowed that they're skimming off the top of. And what little cash flow they've got from the so-called legitimate properties that are there and that grew and that continue to survive as a consequence of money laundering operations. This guy is a criminal. And he's running our economy this way now. He wants Jay Powell, the chairman of the Fed, to lower interest rates a whole point. They lower interest rates in hundredths of points. They're called basis points. Now we're going to drop interest rates 20 basis points. That's 0.21%. Trump says, drop it 1%. Right? Because he's a grifter. He understands financial crime. If he can get the Fed, and he's got the Fed doing it. I mean, they haven't lowered interest rates, but they stopped raising them. Because he knows that during a good economy, presidents who are up for re-election tend to get re-elected. And during a bad economy, presidents who are up for re-election tend to get kicked out. And it sure looks to me like he's trying to push this economy as hard as he can all the way to November of 2020. And after that, he doesn't care. If it crashes, he'll exploit that as, just the same way Adolf Hitler did in the 1930s. And for that matter, the same way FDR did. And if it doesn't crash, hey, life's good.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what do you think is, do you disagree or agree with me on my assessment of the economy? And what do you think is hidden in Trump's tax returns that he's so desperate to hide? And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, oh, this is interesting. My my call screener just crashed. I'm going to reboot it, and hopefully everything will be good. So, Trump is a grifter. We get that. The entire Trump crime family, a bunch of grifters. We get that. So what do we do about it? Where do we go with this? Len in Woodmere, New York. Watch this on YouTube. Hey, Len, what's on your mind?
Hi. The thing we do is presume that the economy is not going to crash between now and November 20. And there's simple 6 sentences that the Democrats have to repeat, like the Republicans repeat their mantra. And here they are. Here's what you need to know, and even Donald Trump will understand it. In 2009, the economy was like a golf ball stuck in a sand trap. Barack Obama walked up to the ball and took his best shot. The ball went sailing and sailing. In 2017, Obama stepped away, and Trump walked up to the tee, pointed to the sailing economy, and said, "Look what I did." It's not the Trump economy, folks. It's the Obama economy, and Trump just happens to be there now. That's all.
Yeah, it's the tail end of the or the Obama economy. I agree with you, Len, and that's very well said. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Olga in Concord, California. Hey, Olga, what's on your mind today?
Hi. Gotta get a little nervous. Hi.
It's okay. Hi.
Let's see here. It's really important to tie it all together. However, yeah, I think he's scared of the money laundering he's done, and it makes me sick that he was anything with Papa Doc or Baby Doc Dubai. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. And I think it's important to get into how it is that the security clearances for his family were given. That will pick a scab off.
Well, the guy who was in charge of that testified before Congress last week in closed session. Trump had tried to prevent him from testifying. And apparently in his testimony, he said that there was, and I got this from the Washington Post, he said that there was no influence put on him from the White House to clear those things. I think he was lying, but I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. I haven't seen the testimony, but it gives one pause.
It really does. And I think that the Democrats need to really pound the emoluments.
Yeah.
Pound it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But the main, because multiple fixes are in. Lots of states are going to do that thing about the majority voting across the nation for the, what do you call that stupid voting process? What do you call those things?
The Electoral College?
That's it.
Yeah.
So there's fixes in and little things. But the main important constitutional fix, I believe, would be to remove presidential pardoning power. Because without it, Reagan would have gone to jail. Bushes would have gone to jail. Trump will go to jail. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Nixon would have gone to jail.
I don't know if you can say circle jerk, but there's a circle jerk of criminality.
There is.
Going on, and that pardon, it has to go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's written into the Constitution, so it would take a constitutional amendment, which ain't going to happen any day soon. But I don't disagree with your sentiment, Olga. Right down to exactly what they're up to. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. In our newest members-only video, we examine every day here on the Thom Hartmann Program, Louise and I and our team, Sean, Nate, Shira, Dave, Chase, Sue, Nigel, Ron, we all work to put together the very, very best show we possibly can. And there's an enormous amount of work that goes into the show. And one of the things that comes out of that is a lot of content, a lot of specific information that we go through and we dig out and, we want to share with you. And Sue puts that into our newsletter every week. And I think you will, if you don't already receive our newsletter, it comes in email every day, about an hour after we're off the air, or maybe a couple hours after we're off the air. And Sue goes through and pulls literally every link to every story that we talked about and puts it into the newsletter. It's free. We don't sell the list or anything. You complete safety and security. There's no charge. There's no nothing. Just, plug in your email address over at thomhartmann.com and you get signed up for the newsletter. It's all fairly obvious. You'll see it on the website. So check it out, thomhartmann.com. Thank you. In Chicago. Hey, Lewis, what's on your mind?
Yeah, morning, Tom. I don't think there's anything that we can get from Trump's tax returns. There's nothing in there. He doesn't have as much money as he claimed at one point.
How do you know that? And how do you know there's nothing in his tax returns that we should care about? What do you know that I don't know, Lewis?
That's the only thing that makes sense. What are you going to find out of his tax returns? There's not much. You don't make any sense.
Why is he hiding them, Lewis?
If he's jerking you around.
No, I don't think so. If he wanted to be president, if his tax returns were not revealing either crimes or something horribly embarrassing, he would have released them when he was running for president.
Would have charged him with something.
The IRS is not investigating wealthy people anymore, Lewis. Those investigations last multiple years. I don't know if you caught the article in the New York Times last week, but the IRS has pretty much stopped all multi-year investigations of rich people, which puts the lie to Trump saying he's continuously under audit. And by the way, the IRS also has a rule that they never audit anybody more than 3 years in a row, ever. So A, he's probably not being audited, and B, so therefore the crimes may be revealed. And B, again, what's he hiding? What do you think he's hiding?
I told you what I think he's hiding. The fact that he's just not as worth as much as he said before.
What about if he's completely broke? What if the guy in the White House, what if it was a scam when he did The Apprentice and claimed to be a successful businessman? Why was that $14 million a year so important to him from The Apprentice that he decided to run for president of the United States because Gwen Stefani was making $2 million a year more than he was on NBC? That's why he ran for president, because he was pissed off when he learned that Gwen Stefani was making more than him. He ran for president as a stunt to get NBC to raise his pay. Why would he do that if he didn't need the paycheck?
I have no idea, but why does he?
Well, neither do I. That's why I want to see his tax returns.
He doesn't a paycheck, and if he's doing some sort of money laundering, he wouldn't be broke. So your logic just doesn't add up at all.
Well, no, I would say that the assets that he has, the buildings that he has as the result of money laundering. And I think that he's been living off money that he's been borrowing from Deutsche Bank. And that may be coming to a close here fairly soon, which is why he's telling all these foreign governments and all the Republicans, go to Trump properties and spend as much money as you can, which they're doing, Lewis.
Right. And if he has assets, he's not broke. He has assets. It's just a simple matter of selling them off.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see when we see his tax returns, Lewis. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. It's 27 minutes past the hour here on the Thom Hartmann Program. What is Trump hiding? What do you think Trump is hiding? Caller report. This is from
the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Speaking the truth, the multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about. Thom Hartmann here with you. We'll be back. Caller report. This is from page 4. It's titled Executive Summary to Volume 1, Russian Social Media Campaign. The Internet Research Agency carried out the earliest Russian interference operations identified by the investigation, a social media campaign designed to provoke and amplify political and social discord in the United States. The IRA was based in St. Petersburg, Russia, and received funding from Russian oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin and companies he controlled. Prigozhin is widely reported to have ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin, large chunk of unredacted stuff. In mid-2014, the IRA sent employees to the United States on an intelligence gathering mission with instructions redacted. The IRA later used social media accounts and interest groups to sow discord in the U.S. political system through what it termed, quote, information warfare, end quote. The campaign evolved from a generalized program designed in 2014 and 2015 to undermine the U.S. electoral system to a targeted operation that by early 2016 favored candidate Trump and disparaged candidate Clinton. The IRA's operation also included the purchase of political advertisements on social media in the names of U.S. persons and entities, as well as the staging of political rallies inside the United States. To organize those rallies, IRA employees posed as U.S. grassroots entities and persons and made contact with Trump supporters and Trump campaign officials in the United States. The investigation did not identify evidence that any U.S. persons conspired or coordinated with the IRA. Section 2 of this report details the office's investigation of the Russian social media campaign. Russian hacking operations. At the same time that the IRA began to focus on supporting candidate Trump in early 2016, the Russian government employed a second form of interference, cyber intrusions, hacking, and release of hacked materials damaging to the Clinton campaign. The Russian intelligence service, known as the Main Intelligence Directorate of the General Staff of the Russian Army, GRU, carried out these operations. In March 2016, the GRU began hacking the email accounts of Clinton campaign volunteers and employees, including campaign chairman John Podesta. In April 2016, the GRU hacked the computer networks of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the DRCC, the DCCC, and the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. The GRU stole hundreds of thousands of documents from the compromised email accounts and networks. Around the time that the DNC announced in mid-June 2016 the Russian government's role in hacking its network, the GRU began disseminating stolen materials through fictitious online personas, DC Leaks, and Guccifer 2.0. The GRU later released additional materials through the organization WikiLeaks. The presidential campaign of Donald J. Trump campaign, showed interest in WikiLeaks releases of documents and welcomed their potential to damage candidate Clinton. Beginning in June 2016, redacted, forecast to senior campaign officials that WikiLeaks would release information damaging to candidate Clinton. WikiLeaks' first release came in July 2016. Around the same time, candidate Trump announced that he hoped Russia would recover emails described as missing from a private server used by Clinton when she was Secretary of State, parenthesis. He later said he was speaking sarcastically, close parenthesis. Redacted. WikiLeaks began releasing Podesta's stolen emails on October 7, 2016, less than 1 hour after a U.S. media outlet released video considered damaging to candidate Trump. Section 3 of this report details the office's investigation into the Russian hacking operations, as well as other efforts by Trump campaign supporters to obtain Clinton-related emails. Russian contacts with the campaign. The social media campaign and the GRU hacking operations coincided with a series of contacts between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. The office investigated whether, this is the Mueller's office when he says the office investigated whether those contacts reflected or resulted in the campaign, that's the Trump campaign, conspiring or coordinating with Russia in its election interference activities. Although the investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected that it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The Russian contacts consisted of business connections, offers of assistance to the campaign, invitations for candidate Trump and Putin to meet in person, invitations for campaign officials and representatives of the Russian government to meet, and policy positions seeking improved U.S.-Russian relations. Section 4 of this report details the contacts between Russia and the Trump campaign during the campaign and transition periods, the most salient of which are summarized below in chronological order. 2015, Some of the earliest contacts were made in connection with the Trump Organization real estate project in Russia known as Trump Tower Moscow. Candidate Trump signed a letter of intent for Trump Tower Moscow by November 2015, and in January 2016, Trump Organization executive Michael Cohen emailed and spoke about the project with the Office of Russian Government Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov. The Trump Organization pursued the project through at least June 2016, including by considering travel to Russia by Cohen and candidate Trump. It's the Mueller Report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. John in Marne, Michigan. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Hey, I wanted to talk about Trump's ventures, and thing that hasn't been brought up lately is his attempt to buy into the NFL and how egregious he is with being turned down, or what's the right word, that he wanted to promote a boycott with.
Right, how vindictive he was. And wasn't that the one that he tried to borrow $1 billion from Deutsche Bank and lied to them that Michael Cohen was talking about? Am I remembering that right?
I don't know. I just picked up an article about him laying down a cash offer, and he got beat out by $400,000. And but I didn't catch that. But nothing's off the table with him.
Well, the billionaires who own the NFL did not want Donald Trump to be part of their club. And, apparently for good reason. They knew he's a grifter, and the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, and they also noted how the narcissist came out in him and how he carried on about himself and not necessarily about the product. It was
and this is when he tried to fund an alternative football league. Wasn't it the AFL, the American Football League, that went belly up when Trump got involved?
USFL, I believe.
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah, and they're gonna force him to merge in, and they were gonna compete with him, and that failed.
Yeah, it didn't work out all that well. Another thing that we learned from the New York Times report today, John, that I thought was pretty amazing, was that Trump was doing pump and dump schemes, and I thought this was illegal. Every now and then I've gotten emails from people, from, quote, investment newsletters, right? And they look very legitimate. They look like a real investment newsletter. And they say, hey, this stock is about to explode. And then they go through 3 or 4 paragraphs about why that stock is going to go up. This company owns precious metals in Namibia, and they've got the world's corner on it. And pretty soon the new semiconductors are going to require this particular type of chromium or whatever it be. And so their stock is trading at 30 cents a share right now, but it's going to go to $300 a share. Buy some now. Now, they're not trying to sell it to you. They're not trying to get you to interact with them in any way. They're only trying to get the price of the stock to go up, because what they've done is they've bought $1 million worth of this stock at 30 cents a share. And if they can get 10,000 people out of the 5 or 10 million of these so-called investment newsletters that they send out, if they can get 10, 20,000 people or 100,000 people to simply buy 100 shares each of the stock at 30 cents a share, it's going to go up. And then when it goes up to $1 or $2 or $3 or $4 a share, they sell, and then all these small investors are left holding the bag as the stock collapses back down to the 30 cents a share that it's actually worth. It's called a pump and dump operation. And all you have to do is convince other people that the stock is going to go up because of something, not because of necessarily something you did. Well, what Trump was doing is he was claiming for 4 years in a row, he was claiming that he was going to be like Carl Icahn, a corporate raider. He was buying positions in companies. He'd buy a 5 or 10% position in a company and say, I'm going to take over this company and make it profitable, and it's going to be great. And the stock price would start going up because everybody thought, okay, great. Stock prices typically go up when corporate raiders come in because they lay off all kinds of people and they make the companies more efficient. And Trump never did any of that because he never actually took control of the companies. He just waited until the stock went up and sold it. And he made a profit 4 years in a row doing this. And then the guys on Wall Street figured out that they were being scammed by him, and they started ignoring him. So his pump and dump operations. operations didn't work anymore. I thought this was securities fraud.
Yeah, that nothing. I have never heard of that before, but it reminds me of the stock buyback program that they got going on to me when you're talking about that.
Yeah, that's a huge scam. That was actually authorized by law by the Reagan administration. That was the big change in corporate governance, or one of the two big changes. The other was the enforcement of monopoly laws that the Reagan administration did in '82 and '83 that completely changed the face of American capitalism, completely changed the nature of American business. John, thanks for the call. It's a good point. Charles in Opelika, Florida. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Hey, after listening to, I guess it started Rachel, Lawrence O'Donnell, and then the 11th hour last night, I'm more convinced that the tax rate should be at 50%. We're investing in billionaires. We're investing in people that believe in corporate welfare, and they're taking that money and they're reversing all our civil rights laws as far as what Martin Luther King, and black people marched for, and they're trying to create what they've always wanted, two different Americas, where, right now there's no Republican that's suffering because in their minds they're running the courts, they're running the banks, they're running, they're running roughshod all over us, and there's no one complaining about what bad job that Trump is doing or how he's going to end up hurting our economy.
Yeah.
So,
I'm with you, Charles. I think the big. Yeah, I think the big issue, your original point was that the business tax rates need to go above 50%. And I've been singing that song for years. When you look at countries that have a strong middle class, they always, always, always have a top tax rate above 50%. So you don't have massive, mind-boggling, Walton family, $100 billion, or Koch family, $80 billion wealth. You don't have these enormous concentrations of wealth at the top because, hey, after you've taken your first $100 million, you don't need to take any more, and why do it if half of it's going to go to the government? But when Reagan dropped the top tax rate from 74% down to 25%, guess what happened? Suddenly, all this money started going to the top 1/100th of 1%, and which totally suppressed wages and working people, and nobody has gotten a raise in the bottom 90% since Reagan became president. Whereas at the top, at the very top, the top 100th of 1%, they've seen over a 900% increase in their income and a massive explosion in their wealth. And this destabilizes not just business, but the entire country. Spot on. Well said, Charles. Thank you. Chris in Salem, Oregon. Hey, Chris, what's on your mind?
What's up, Tom? So my talking point, really, when Democrats are going after Trump for his grifterism, and when conservatives are like, we need to quit with the identity stuff and the ad hominem attacks, our talking points should be, as Donald Rumsfeld used to say, democracy is messy, and if the shoe were on the other foot, and we had Hillary Clinton, if Hillary Clinton alone started to float the idea of a 6-year term, it would just be calls for impeachment, Fox News. This would be the hill that they died on.
It would be the end of the republic.
And so that's my thing, Tom, is like we just have to, when they go low, we go low too. We jump in the you-know-what show with them. So,
well, can you imagine if Barack Obama had been cutting deals with foreign autocrats, particularly, Russian autocrats or Ukrainian autocrats or former Soviet autocrats? Even one little Al Gore had a fundraiser in 2000 that he showed up at. He didn't even put it on. It was put on by a wealthy family in Los Angeles. And there were a couple of people from I believe it was Chinese, might have been Taiwanese. In fact, I think it was Taiwanese now that I think about it, from a wealthy family who was associated with a wealthy church, and they gave money to Al Gore's campaign there. It became a scandal, a national scandal, foreign money going to Al Gore's campaign. Oh, my God. And Trump is president because oligarchs, including Russian oligarchs and a company owned by a Russian oligarch, spent all this money on Facebook convincing, he reached over 100 million people, according to the Mueller report, with anti-Clinton, pro-Trump messages that in many cases were just blatant lies. Can you imagine if that had happened for Obama? He would have been in office 30 seconds. You're absolutely right. Chris, thank you for the call. Steve in Brunswick, Georgia. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure, Steve. Speak up a little if you can, please.
Given this any thought, but I was a mortgage banker for 9 years. We closed the loan in our name, and then the loan was sold on the secondary market.
Right.
I have a funny feeling that all of Trump's loans with Deutsche Bank have been purchased by the Russians, and that's how they're controlling him.
Oh, that's interesting. That had not even occurred to me. That, why would Deutsche Bank be willing to write off a $300 or $400 million loan to Trump back in the 90s when he refused to repay it? Or maybe it was the early 2000s. He didn't just refuse to pay it. He then sued them, saying that, I think it was the crash of 99 or 2000, there was that dot-com bubble burst. He said because of that, he shouldn't have to pay it back. It was force majeure, which is in the contracts. It was an act of God. And and they said, okay, fine, you don't have to pay it back. And I think that he's been living on that $400 million that, he borrowed from Deutsche Bank and never paid back ever since. But then they loaned him another $1 billion.
I wonder why. I'm going to tell you why. It's because those loans are secured by the Russians. They're being sold to the Russians. And by them owning those loans, they're controlling him. Not, it's an indirect control.
Well, Steve, you're a banker and you understand this stuff. Pardon my interrupting, but we only have 30 seconds. Do you think it's possible that Deutsche Bank has been sharing documents with the House, the House Judiciary Committee, it turns out. Do you think that we'll find that out from those Deutsche Bank documents?
I have a funny feeling that we are going to find out unless somehow they are still holding the loans in their name.
Yeah.
I doubt that they are. I think that they've sold those loans to the Russians.
Yeah. Is that called subordinating a loan? There's a word for that, isn't it?
It's subordinating a loan. It's like when you get a mortgage from XYZ company, and then a year later, you're getting a bill from a different mortgage company.
Right.
They've sold that loan.
Right.
They don't own it anymore. They might just be servicing it.
Right. But the actual loan itself, they subordinated to another lender. So you're suggesting that Deutsche Bank has been subordinating the Trump loans to Russian oligarchs. Boy, that would be a blockbuster. Steve, you may well be right. Thanks for bringing your expertise to our show.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump is ginning up a war in Iran because that war in Venezuela just didn't work out the way he hoped. Got it. And welcome back. Roosevelt in Galesburg, Illinois. Hey, Roosevelt, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
How you doing, Tom?
I'm well. I hope you are too.
Oh, I'm quite well. I draw a lot of comparisons between you and myself. I bet you're a vegan, aren't you?
A vegan?
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been hardcore vegans now for a couple of weeks. We were 99% vegans, and then we just decided, we're going to go the whole way. So here we are. How about you?
And I'm a vegetarian.
Cool. Good.
A lot of the way you literally sometimes just appear to mispronounce words, I do the same thing.
Okay.
They're not really mispronunciations. They are variant pronunciations.
There you go. That's how
scholarly we are.
There you go. There you go. You called about the Trump tax, though, right?
Right. What struck me as consequential was when they mentioned a $52.9 million spike in his finances.
Right, in his interest income. Yeah.
Yeah, and when they said the year, that's what struck me, because at that time the Soviet Union knew that they were losing to the Afghans and that the Americans were bagging the Afghans, and that would be one good way to get back at the Americans if they could plant someone in America in a position of power and have them under their control.
So you think that Trump has been a Manchurian candidate? I don't recall which year that was, Roosevelt. Do you?
89.
89. So you think he's been a Manchurian candidate ever since 89? He started talking about running for president in the late 80s and the early 90s. So maybe.
Mm-hmm. And that's when the Union collapsed, around 1990.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And one more thing. If I were Bob Mueller, I would be highly indignant
Yeah, I think he
did
is.
2 years of work on a report. I indicted more people than has been seen in recent investigations.
Right.
And Congress and the rest of the governmental bodies promised to protect the Mueller investigation. I mean, I recall this specifically.
Mm-hmm.
A year before the investigation came to an end, everybody, we're going to protect the Mueller investigation. What do? They stick a fat, froggish, four-eyed freak over him who closes down the investigation on the first day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he and Bill Barr did a very, very good job of setting the tone. I mean, it's the same thing he did for George Herbert Walker Bush back in the 90s when he blew up the Iraq-Gate investigation and the Iran-Contra investigation. He blew up this investigation by causing everybody in America to think that, in fact, what the Mueller report did was completely exonerate Donald Trump, when, in fact, it lays out 11 specific charges of obstruction of justice that as 700 now prosecutors around the country have said. And the prosecutors tend not to be, bleeding heart liberals. As all of them have said, any other American would be under indictment right now. They'd be in jail. So I think you got it. You've got it, Roosevelt. Roosevelt, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We're going to check in with Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News in just a moment. So stick around. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, where we ask, is Walmart a person? And we say, no, not a chance. Don't feed me that stuff. We'll be right back. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
So let's check in with Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen's new book, Loving What You Do. Ellen, what's going on in the world today?
Wow. Well, first of all, Iran looks like it may pull partially out of its agreement. Now, the agreement was with United States and 5 other countries. The agreement says that they're going to sell heavy water and fuel that they make, but now they're saying they're going to keep it, which means they're probably going to make some kind of weapon.
Right. Heavy water is used for the detonators. They get, deuterium or something like that, out of some element out of it. And
right, exactly.
This heavy isotope of hydrogen. And then the waste, of course, they can refine. They run it through the centrifuges and extract the still explosive stuff.
Right. And so they say they're going to pull out of the agreement. Now, of course, you have somebody who believes basically that we ought to go to a war with Iran, John Bolton. But, he's not going to hopefully succeed.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, you will recall, Ellen, and this is the thing that just absolutely haunts me, is, Trump's repeated tweets about how, he was going to, this is November 29, 2011. Donald Trump tweeted, in order to get elected, Barack Obama would start a war with Iran. on October 9th, 2012. Now that Obama's poll numbers are in a tailspin, watch for him to launch a strike on Iran. He is desperate. September 16, 2013, Donald Trump tweeted, "I predict that President Obama will at some point attack Iran in order to save his face, his presidency." And then November 10th, 2013, "Remember that I predicted long ago that President Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly, not skilled." Trump thinks that attacking Iran is the way that presidents get themselves reelected. That's what worries me, Ellen.
That worries me too, because I think it's really stupid. But hey.
Yeah, but he believes it.
I know.
He believes it, and,
right.
he's the guy sitting in the White House.
Now, Uber and Lyft have, not only in the United States, but in the UK, South America, Australia, have actually had their drivers do a work action today. They want livable incomes, job security. That is what they want, and this is ahead of the Wall Street filing for Uber, which is probably going to happen tomorrow.
This is why Uber is working as hard as they can to get driverless cars perfected so that they don't have to deal with these labor problems.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, I won't take Uber, but that's just me.
Yeah. Well, Lyft is an alternative.
Right. Okay. Now, the president went to Florida today. He is looking at Hurricane Michael, and then he's going to have a rally in the Panhandle. Now, what's really interesting is that the governor last week came and said to the president, hey, you better not come to Florida empty-handed, because people from Hurricane Michael are still suffering. So the president is going to be taking a look at the remnants of Hurricane Michael, which occurred last October. And
is that the hurricane that took out Puerto Rico too?
No, that was a different hurricane, I think.
Okay. Like Maria or something, yeah. Okay.
Right. There was, by the way, another Hurricane Michael earlier on, I think in 2011.
Yeah, they reset the names
Remember,
every
they
year.
used to name hurricanes all after women, and then they changed it.
Yep.
Now, it looks like they are going to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt. Now, what's really interesting is the last Attorney General that was held in contempt was Eric Holder for Fast and Furious. They said that it's not because he won't testify, it's because he won't make the report unredacted. Now, I just got to tell you that they did do some redactions, but not all of them, and they made the report available in Congress. And it is true that no Democrats went to see it. Now, I have some problems with that. I think they should have at least shown their face.
Yeah.
But it looks like they are going to issue a contempt for Attorney General Barr. Now, what's so fascinating about that is let's assume they issue the contempt filing for him. Well, the point is that the person that it gets sent to, or the place it gets sent to, is the Justice Department, of which Barr is head of.
Right. I know. And with Eric Holder, it didn't take 6 years for that process to end, for the litigation of that process to end?
It took a long time, and that's the problem now, too, because if it goes to the courts, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, Trump's just trying to run out the clock.
Trump could get, right, and President Trump could get reelected.
Right, that's the whole point. He's trying to push all this stuff post-2020, just like Nixon did, by the way. You know, you'll recall the Watergate break-in. The news of that happened before the election of '72.
Right.
And he was like, oh, nothing to see here, nothing to see here.
I remember exactly where I was when I heard he won the '72 election.
Yeah, I don't, but I probably should. It was a turning point in American history.
It certainly was. Okay, so now Trump had his leaked tax returns sent to the New York Times. Now, these were not the recent ones. It was 9 years ending in 1984. So, but it shows huge losses. And then Trump today said, you always want to show losses. It was a sport. Hello?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even believe he's saying that.
You know, I just saw this. David K. Johnston is saying that $53 million interest payment that Donald Trump got was for doing business with international cocaine trafficker Joseph Wexelbaum. That he was in cocaine trafficking.
You can't even make this stuff up.
Yeah, it's amazing. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Great talking with you. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, you know, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot. We are reading from the Mueller report. This is from page 5. It's the subset of Russian contacts with the campaign. Spring 2016. Campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who had connections to Russia and traveled to Moscow in April 2016. Immediately upon his return to London from that trip, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, in the first week of May 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to candidate Clinton. Throughout that period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. No meeting took place. September 2016. Russian outreach to the Trump campaign continued into the summer of 2016 as candidate Trump was becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On June 9th, 2016, for example, a Russian lawyer met with senior Trump campaign officials Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort to deliver what the email proposed the meeting had described as, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary, end quote. The materials were offered to Trump Jr. as, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. The written communications setting up the meeting showed that the campaign anticipated receiving information from Russia that could assist candidate Trump's electoral prospects, but the Russian lawyer's presentation did not provide such information. Days after the June 9 meeting, and on June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm and the DNC announced that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC and obtained access to opposition research on candidate Trump, among other documents. In July 2016, campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page traveled in his personal capacity to Moscow and gave the keynote address at the New Economic School. Page had lived and worked in Russia between 2003 and 2007. After returning to the United States, Page became acquainted with at least 2 Russian intelligence officers, one of whom was later charged in 2015 with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of Russia. Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew media attention. The campaign then distanced itself from Page and by late September 2016 removed him from the campaign. July 2016 was also the month WikiLeaks first released emails stolen by the GRU from the DNC. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks posted thousands of internal DNC documents revealing information about the Clinton campaign. Within days, there was public reporting that U.S. intelligence agencies had high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of emails and documents from the DNC. And within a week of the release, a foreign government informed the FBI about its May 2016 interaction with Papadopoulos and his statement that the Russian government could assist the Trump campaign. On July 31st, 2016, based on the foreign government reporting, the FBI opened an investigation into potential coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Separately, on August 2nd, 2016, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort met in New York City with his longtime business associate Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Kilimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a, quote, backdoor, end quote, way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believe the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed were he to be elected president. They also discussed the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's strategy for winning Democratic votes in Midwestern states. Months before that meeting, Manafort had caused internal polling data to be shared with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued for some period of time after their August meeting. Fall 2016. On October 7th, 2016, the media released video of candidate Trump speaking in graphic terms about women years earlier, which was considered damaging to his candidacy. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks made its second release. Thousands of John Podesta's emails that had been stolen by the GRU in late March of 2016. The FBI and other U.S. government institutions were at the time continuing their investigation of suspected Russian government efforts to interfere in the presidential election. That same day, October 7th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint public statement that, quote, the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, end quote. Those thefts and the disclosures of the hacked materials through online platforms such as WikiLeaks, the statement continued, quote, are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. Post-2016 election. Immediately after the November 8 election, Russian government officials and prominent Russian businessmen began to make inroads into the new administration. The most senior levels of the Russian government encouraged these efforts. The Russian embassy made contact hours after the election to congratulate the president-elect and arrange a call with President Putin. It's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Twitter specialists, redacted. It's the Mueller report.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us, we've been talking. First of all, we've just had a whole spectrum of stuff. We had a debate the first hour with Julio Rivera, the editorial director of Reactionary Times, about Donald Trump and what he's up to and all that kind of stuff. And then, what does America do with a grifter president who's actually broke? Buckle up on the economy in our second hour. We've been talking about that for some time. And now Paul Ryan is with us. Not that one. Paul Ryan. This Paul S. Ryan is the Vice President of Policy and Litigation at Common Cause. He's the good Paul Ryan. CommonCause.org is the website. And Paul, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So you guys issued a press release saying that despite Mitch McConnell, Congress must hold the Trump administration accountable for, turning over information, for what Bill Barr is up to, all these kind of things. You want to quickly make that point?
Sure. I mean, at this point, we're talking about contempt proceedings. We're urging Congress to hold Bill Barr in contempt. There are others who are likewise worthy of contempt proceedings. And the House is considering such a contempt resolution against Attorney General Barr right now, this afternoon.
Right. Now, when Eric Holder refused to turn over Fast and Furious documents to a Republican-led House committee, knowing that they were going to publicize them and risk the agency, the ATF agency programs, he refused to do it. He felt that it was a partisan witch hunt. He was held in contempt, and my recollection is that litigation took years, which, in my opinion, is exactly what Trump is counting on, that this is going to end up in the courts. And it's going to have to go through a couple of levels of court until it gets to the Supreme Court, or maybe even go straight to the Supreme Court. But bottom line is, he thinks he can make this thing last until after November 2020, and after that, it won't matter. What say you?
Well, I'm not naive. Common Cause, my colleagues here at Common Cause are not naive. We acknowledge that the contempt process itself is unsatisfactory, but it's what we've got, and we think it's really important for members of Congress to do their job, regardless of gaming out what the consequences or the outcomes might be down the road. There are a couple different types of contempt proceedings available to Congress. the way that the Holder contempt proceedings went was into civil court, and you're entirely correct. I mean, the litigation took years, and in fact, although Holder was ordered to turn over some documents, he was not ordered to turn over others that Congress wanted. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016, took office in 2017, and then it was his DOJ. And he cut deals with Congress to provide them with the documents they had been seeking for years.
On Fast and Furious.
Yes.
So that didn't get resolved for, half a decade. The flip side of this is that John Mitchell, who was the Attorney General for Richard Nixon, went to prison for 19 months for lying to Congress. We've seen at least one clear and several probable areas where Bill Barr has lied to Congress, and I'm talking the modern era. I'm not talking about his lies to Congress back in the 90s. It seems if the tables were turned, that the Republicans would not be going for let's just say that he's in contempt. Instead, they'd be, we're going to lock his ass up. Why don't we do that?
Well, for one of the reasons that this is unlikely to turn out that way is that there's a big difference between perjury, for which you cannot assert executive privilege as a shield, and withholding documents, refusing to comply with subpoenas, which is what Bill Barr is doing, what Congress is talking about today. And President Trump has explicitly now, as of today, asserted executive privilege over those documents. It's the scope of that executive privilege that is what would get hashed out in court. It's the assertion of executive privilege that will enable Attorney General Barr and everyone underneath him, including the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, to simply refuse to prosecute Barr for contempt in a criminal contempt proceeding. That's why, that practice, the unwillingness of the Department of Justice to criminally prosecute a congressional contempt citation goes all the way back to the 1980s and the Reagan administration, at least. And that's what leaves us in the civil law enforcement context here. But a prosecution for perjury, that's a whole different kettle of fish, and it is not subject to assertion of executive privilege as a shield.
Right. Do you know how John Mitchell ended up in jail?
I don't know.
It was a continuously Republican administration. It happened during the Jerry Ford administration, that prosecution. Although maybe, I guess I need to talk to somebody who knows about that. But I think the largest issue here, Paul Ryan, is the question of what this has done to America. You look at, for example, the Roman Republic, after Julius Caesar was assassinated, and after the fall of the triumvirate, basically, when Augustus declared his, absolute emperorship over Rome, that was the end of a 500-year-long democracy, a republic, and the beginning of another 1,400 years of being an empire. Is it possible that if the Supreme Court backs up Donald Trump on this, and I think that there's a good chance that they will. You've got a couple of members, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, who are on the record as being in favor of, the unitary executive theory, if the president really is a king, that this presidency being done by, an incompetent bumbler, basically, who's trying to hide the fact that he's got a past as a grifter and a liar, that he is, through his incompetence, not doing the kinds of things that you would have expected from somebody like Mussolini or Hitler, who were actually competent people. But what he has done is he has shown where the holes are. He has shown where the cracks are. He has shown where a truly competent autocrat, compared to Trump as an incompetent autocrat, a truly competent autocrat, the next Republican president who gets in, could easily say, okay, that's it. It's the end of the republic. I mean, Jimmy Carter on this program 3 years ago said, we're no longer a democracy, we're now an oligarchy. He was not speaking tongue-in-cheek, but he felt that it was still possible to pull back from it. Is it possible that this administration is doing lasting, permanent damage to our republic in a way that we may not recover from?
It's very possible, or likely even. I think that many of the actions of President Trump and his enablers, including Attorney General Barr, they pose a serious threat to democratic order, the constitutional order of this nation. And one of the bedrock principles of government in the United States is that no one is above the law. We thought that until Donald Trump entered the White House, at least. But Donald Trump is really pushing that boundary. He's really trying to break that very simple rule and demonstrate to the public, to the world, that he is above the law, that he can get away with anything he wants. If that turns out to be true, that will be a very lasting, very serious bit of damage to our constitutional order.
To a large extent, didn't that start with John Mitchell, with the Nixon White House, when the Nixon Department of Justice, the Office of Legal Counsel in the Department of Justice, wrote a memo creating a rule, which is not law, but it's policy, I suppose, saying that we, the head cops in the United States, the Department of Justice, we will not indict a sitting president?
Yeah, and I think I want to underscore one aspect of what you just said. It's not a law. It is an opinion that was generated within the Department of Justice, and it needs to be challenged. It needs to be pressed, because anytime you're talking about a separation of powers issue, executive branch versus Congress versus the courts, each branch is going to claim as much power to themselves as they can get away with. And the opinion you just cited, the DOJ won't prosecute the head of the DOJ, namely the president. It's an example of that. It's an example of the executive branch claiming as much power as it possibly can. And
so how do we respond to that?
In Congress.
I mean, should Congress pass a law that says just, a one-sentence law that says no person is above the law? Do we need to amend the Constitution? Is this, you had two Democratic presidents, Clinton and three. You had Carter, Clinton, and Obama, who all had an opportunity to reverse that DOJ opinion and didn't do so. I can understand why Clinton didn't, because he was being held to account by the Republicans in a way that could have been criminal. But I don't understand why neither Carter nor Obama did, unless they just never imagined in their wildest dreams that we'd be in a situation we're in right now.
Well, in the short term, the remedy to this problem that's enshrined in the Constitution is the impeachment process itself. And right. I want to be clear, Common Cause has not yet called for the impeachment of President Trump. It's a national governing board level decision. Our board hasn't gone there yet. But the process that exists to check a rogue executive, a rogue president, a rogue Department of Justice is the impeachment process, and that's fully within the hands of Congress. And it would require, to be certain, it would require some Republicans in the Senate to put country over party. I don't know if we have Republicans in the Senate willing to do that, but
not so
there
far.
Is a process. We haven't, not so far.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you had two. You had Bob Corker and Jeff Flake, and they both left. They were driven out by these guys. Final question. We're talking with Paul S. Ryan, the Vice President for Policy and Litigation and Common Cause. Paul, I asked you about lasting damage to our republic, to the infrastructure, the superstructure of our nation itself, our Republican government, and a small r, our democracy, if you will. What specifically, we have just a minute to the break, what specifically is Common Cause, or what would you, as an attorney and an authority on this stuff, recommend that we be looking at as ways to repair the damage or plug the holes that Trump has exposed in our legal system, in the structure of our government?
A very short answer, but a very comprehensive response is H.R. 1, the bill that was passed by the House this year that crosses many different policy areas of our democracy, voting rights, money in politics, ethics, with solutions to many of the most fundamental problems with our democracy today.
But H.R. 1 has been shot down by Mitch McConnell.
It has been, and with every good piece of reform legislation that's ever passed, it's been a multi-year battle. So Common Cause will continue fighting for H.R. 1, and it's going to take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but we're going to keep fighting.
Yeah. What's the name for H.R. 1? See, this is what Democrats screw up. Democrats come out with CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Plan. It sounds like something you find in a cow pasture. Republicans come up with a Patriot Act.
This is the For the People Act.
For the People Act. Okay, we need to call it that. I would love to see a much sexier name, but that's a start. The For the People Act, H.R. 1. Paul S. Ryan, the Vice President of Policy and Litigation at Common Cause. CommonCause.org is the website. You can tweet him at the Paul S. Ryan. Paul, thanks a lot for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
Great talking with you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. By the way, I asked about the Capitol Police, and one of our listeners sent me some information. The Capitol Police Board is a group of 3 members who maintain jurisdiction over the United States Capitol Police. The 3 members of the board are the acting architect of the Capitol, the Sergeant-at-Arms of the Senate, and the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Representatives. And then the chief of the Capitol Police serves as a member with ex officio status. This still doesn't tell me, though. They have the primary responsibility for protecting life and property, preventing, detecting, and investigating criminal acts, and enforcing traffic regulations through the congressional buildings, parks, and thoroughfares. It doesn't tell me if they go out and arrest people. Officers also have jurisdiction throughout the District of Columbia to take enforcement action when they observe or are made aware of crimes of violence when on official duty. They are charged with the protection of members of Congress. While performing protective functions, they have jurisdiction throughout the United States. It doesn't say that they can arrest somebody held in contempt, and that concerns me. Anyhow, we'll figure out what's going on. Jim in Grays Lake, Illinois. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind?
I remember an article in the Chicago Trib back in 97. It was either 1997, 98, around there. And it was hit the headlines. It was a major executive from Deutsche Bank, who was a senior vice president, was threatening to resign if the bank didn't change its ways. And in that article, it mentioned a bank in Crimea that was tied in, and also one in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if Tom's idea of Trump not being smart enough to run a business could be flipped. Maybe he's not good enough to run a legal business, but if he had an illegal business going in the casinos where he was skimming money and hiding it through this banking system in Europe, and the fact that a Crimea bank was mentioned in that article way back, I don't remember the details of it, mm-hmm. But it could be an interesting thing that because Trump, I know in New Jersey with his casinos, didn't pay the people he owed money to for years, some of them. And in the end, they ended up with paid 5 cents on the dollar or something. Some of them are still out on the road.
Yeah, we had one of them on this show.
The way he treated them.
Yeah.
But I thought it might be interesting to flip your thinking on it, that maybe he is a genius at a legal business.
I think it's entirely possible, Jim. I think he's been cutting corners his whole entire life, from getting his bone spur deferment with a doctored X-ray right straight through to today. And you know, in fact, I think that he's got that criminal mind thing of it's more satisfying if I do it by breaking the law or breaking the rules.
That's my thinking on it. But this senior vice president at that time in Deutsche Bank said that if the bank didn't change its ways, he was going to quit.
That wasn't Anthony Kennedy, Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's son, was it? He apparently worked at Deutsche Bank when Trump got his $1 billion.
I don't remember. No, I wasn't. No, I think it was something. He mentioned something about a Swiss bank or dealings with it, and it was before that.
Interesting. Jim, this is the stuff that will come out when we get to see Trump's finances, and I think it's going to be really, really ugly, and that's why Trump is doing everything in his power to hide this stuff. Jim, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. You know, we put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Here with you. How do we heal from the damage that Donald Trump and the Republican Party, Mitch McConnell is right up to his eyeballs in this stuff. How do we heal from the damage these guys are doing to our republic? What is Trump actually hiding? Is it, as David K. Johnson says, that he was making money on international cocaine trafficking? Really? I mean, I hadn't even imagined that. I just figured he's been broke since the 90s and he's living high on borrowed money from big banks. I don't know. We'll see. Rick in Placentia, California. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Oh, hey, Tom. I caught your some guy calling earlier and saying he didn't think that Trump needed to report his tax returns, and as it were, I do taxes, and I don't want to tell you who exactly for, but I do international tax for U.S. citizens living abroad, and I can think of two very good reasons why he wouldn't want anybody to see those tax returns.
Okay.
First, it's going to show exactly where all of his debt is outstanding and how much he actually has as solvent, which probably is not very much if he got all this money out in loans to Deutsche Bank and Capital One and whatnot. That being said, him being all about wealth, it would destroy him if everybody found out that really he's not a billionaire and most of his money is all tied up and he has not really got all that much cash to begin with.
I don't think he's even a millionaire. I think he's living on borrowed money.
I think he's totally in debt. But the other part of that as well is that it also will show exactly who he's beholden to and has leverage on him.
Now, would a tax return actually show that?
It will show who his debt is outstanding to, like, say, if it's Deutsche Bank or something like that. But the thing about Deutsche Bank as well, if I'm not mistaken, is weren't they under investigation by Interpol or somebody for doing business with Russian oligarchs? And
they pled guilty. They pled guilty to money laundering that involved, I'm not sure if it was specifically Russian, it was definitely former Soviet Union oligarchs. And they paid a multi-million dollar, I thought it was a $500 million, some massive fine for it. That was a couple of years back.
And the other part about that is that if that is indeed the case, then it really doesn't take much dot connecting to assume that he may have been, it may have been because of that he got the loans to begin with. And not just that, isn't he suing Deutsche Bank and Capital One to keep his financial records from coming public? I mean,
yes, he is.
That should tell people something right there, that there is something in it that he does not want anybody to see that could really, make it look like he's not doing, like he's doing business with people he shouldn't have been. And he is the U.S. president now, and that would look really, really bad.
Yeah. The guy's a hustler. He's a scam artist, a grifter, a con man. Yeah, and it's like the Music Man, except he's not charming like Harold Hill was. Rick, thanks a lot for the call. I mean, seriously, it is like the Music Man. He comes to town and he says, you got a problem with pool. Well, and Trump is like, you got a problem with Mexicans on the border. Yeah, right.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's like, look over there at those Mexicans while I pick your pocket. That's what's going on. We put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. We are reading from the Mueller report. This is from page 5. It's the subset of Russian contacts with the campaign. Spring 2016. Campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos made early contact with Joseph Mifsud, a London-based professor who had connections to Russia and traveled to Moscow in April 2016. Immediately upon his return to London from that trip, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russian government had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, in the first week of May 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information damaging to candidate Clinton. Throughout that period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. No meeting took place. September 2016. Russian outreach to the Trump campaign continued into the summer of 2016 as candidate Trump was becoming the presumptive Republican nominee for president. On June 9, 2016, for example, a Russian lawyer met with senior Trump campaign officials Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and campaign chairman Paul Manafort to deliver what the email proposed the meeting had described as, quote, official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary, end quote. The materials were offered to Trump Jr. as, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, end quote. The written communications setting up the meeting showed that the campaign anticipated receiving information from Russia that could assist candidate Trump's electoral prospects, but the Russian lawyer's presentation did not provide such information. Days after the June 9 meeting and on June 14, 2016, a cybersecurity firm and the DNC announced that Russian government hackers had infiltrated the DNC and obtained access to opposition research on candidate Trump, among other documents. In July 2016, campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page traveled in his personal capacity to Moscow and gave the keynote address at the New Economic School. Page had lived and worked in Russia between 2003 and 2007. After returning to the United States, Page became acquainted with at least 2 Russian intelligence officers, one of whom was later charged in 2015 with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of Russia. Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew media attention. The campaign then distanced itself from Page and by late September 2016 removed him from the campaign. July 2016 was also the month WikiLeaks first released emails stolen by the GRU from the DNC. On July 22, 2016, WikiLeaks posted thousands of internal DNC documents revealing information about the Clinton campaign. Within days, there was public reporting that U.S. intelligence agencies had high confidence that the Russian government was behind the theft of emails and documents from the DNC. And within a week of the release, a foreign government informed the FBI about its May 2016 interaction with Papadopoulos and his statement that the Russian government could assist the Trump campaign. On July 31, 2016, based on the foreign government reporting, the FBI opened an investigation into potential coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Separately, on August 2, 2016, Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort met in New York City with his longtime business associate Konstantin Kilimnik, who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence. Kilimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort acknowledged to the special counsel's office was a, quote, backdoor, end quote, way for Russia to control part of eastern Ukraine. Both men believe the plan would require candidate Trump's assent to succeed were he to be elected president. They also discussed the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's strategy for winning Democratic votes in Midwestern states. Months before that meeting, Manafort had caused internal polling data to be shared with Kilimnik, and the sharing continued for some period of time after their August meeting. Fall 2016. On October 7, 2016, the media released video of candidate Trump speaking in graphic terms about women years earlier, which was considered damaging to his candidacy. Less than an hour later, WikiLeaks made its second release. Thousands of John Podesta's emails that had been stolen by the GRU in late March of 2016. The FBI and other U.S. government institutions were at the time continuing their investigation of suspected Russian government efforts to interfere in the presidential election. That same day, October 7th, the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence issued a joint public statement that, quote, the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations, end quote. Those thefts and the disclosures of the hacked materials through online platforms such as WikiLeaks, the statement continued, quote, are intended to interfere with the U.S. election process, end quote. Post-2016 election. Immediately after the November 8 election, Russian government officials and prominent Russian businessmen began to make inroads into the new administration. The most senior levels of the Russian government encouraged these efforts. The Russian embassy made contact hours after the election to congratulate the president-elect and arrange a call with President Putin. It's the Mueller report.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thom Hartmann here with you. Richard in Bellflower, California. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to remind your listeners about Joe Biden, or some people want to call him Uncle Joe, when he was on the side of the credit card company. When he was, didn't he help sponsor the bill so college students could not default?
He helped write the bill.
Yeah. And then, if that's not bad enough, he actually helped get Clarence Thomas on the bench of the Supreme Court.
I get all that, Richard, and I think that all of that is common knowledge, and I really don't want to do the circular firing squad thing. This is the history that some of these folks have, and Joe Biden's going to have to deal with that history. We'll see how it shakes out. It's up to the Democratic primary voters, though. Rudy in Riverdale, Georgia. Hey, Rudy, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you feel?
Good.
All right. Hey, as crazy as this may sound, and if we can get through this, I think this country needed this what you call a small animal, because it's going to allow us to actually go back and correct the Constitution.
Yeah, Rudy, if we live through this, I agree with you.
And the only thing that may save us is that Donald Trump is a very unattractive, obnoxious person, meaning by him looking the way he is and acting that way, then people will be turned off. So I'm glad that he's not like a charming Tom Brady, someone that can actually someone that's actually charming and good looking and knows how to actually speak a complete sentence. So that being said, he's going to be his own downfall. But in the meantime, we need to actually go back, look at our wrongs in the Constitution and try to correct them.
Yeah.
Am I crazy for saying that?
No. You're singing my song, Rudy. I really need to write an op-ed about this. I think that the Trump presidency has exposed weaknesses in our current constitutional form of government, weaknesses that were not, they've probably been there from the founding. The fact that John Adams, back in 1798 could get the Alien and Sedition Acts passed by one vote in the House and then imprison 18 newspaper publishers in the next 2 weeks, should have been a warning to all of us. But basically, every president since then has been on good behavior, as it were, and just trusting to the good behavior of a president and assuming that things like shame would motivate them, or the threat of shame, the danger of shame would motivate them to good behavior, obviously is not enough when you have a shameless, sociopathic narcissist in the White House. And I'm just worried that the next shameless, narcissistic sociopath is actually going to be a lot smarter than Donald Trump, because it's becoming really obvious to me that Donald Trump has, if anything, a mediocre to average intelligence.
Exactly. So just think of someone that was charming enough to weaponize this situation and do the smart things and know when to shut up and know when not to shut up. And I mean, this is what I'm afraid of, is someone that knows how to get in there and actually circumvent other situations I mean, it can get ugly then. So we need to go back and make repairs.
I completely agree, and I guarantee you that people like Robert Mercer, the billionaire who funded Donald Trump, and Shelley Adelson, the billionaire, another billionaire who funded Donald Trump, and some of the others, are looking at this going, okay, so this is how you get around. If we want our companies to pollute and kill people, and it doesn't matter, this is how we get around constitutional government, and that scares the crap out of me. Rudy, thanks a lot for the call. Glenn in Olivet, Michigan. Hey, Glenn, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. It's been an interesting day watching your show and talking about things that Trump's hiding from.
Yeah, what do you think he's hiding with his taxes?
Personally, I think what he's hiding from is all of his campaign promises. I mean, he makes all kinds of promises that he was going to show his taxes, he was going to be a self-made millionaire.
So you think this is just circus to distract us?
I think that's what it is. He was going to drain the swamp. He was going to defeat ISIS within 30 days. He was going to repeal and replace Obamacare within 100 days with a better, cheaper policy that would be good for everybody.
Right. He was going to bring the jobs home from China in the first year.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many things, and I think his tweets are just diversion to keep us from realizing that he's alive.
Yeah, it may well be true, Glenn. I mean, that's a very Occam's razor, simplest explanation. And certainly having learned how to do reality television from, 10, 11, 12 years, whatever it was on NBC, playing a successful businessman at the same time that he was losing money hand over fist and on the edge of bankruptcy, it taught him how to build suspense, how to grab the narrative, how to control the message. I mean, it was the best learning lesson of his life. It turned him from a low-level, hustler and con man in the New York real estate market, affiliated with the mafia. It turned him from that into a high-level grifter who actually ended up in the White House. Spot on, Glenn. Thank you. August in Sherman, Texas. Hey, August, what's on your mind today?
Hello.
Hey.
Money laundering is on my mind.
You think that's what he's hiding?
Well, we spoke about a year ago on more current taxes that he wouldn't release.
Right.
And these 85 to 94 taxes, David K. Johnson mentioned that some of the losses that he showed that he said was as sport because it was investment, he said he didn't have the properties to have that much investment to lose.
That's right.
He didn't have that money to lose. How could he declare that as a loss, which kind of, obviously smells bad, seems money laundering.
Well, I think he lost it. He bought this airline from Eastern for, I think it was over $150 million, and he, ran it down to where it was worth $40 million and then declared bankruptcy on it or shut it down. He took a huge loss on that. He had all these various products. I mean, he had Trump ties and Trump vodka and Trump this and Trump that. Most of those went down, out of business. I think the reason why Ivanka has spun off her own companies and her own brand is that she knows that she's got to get something going and get it profitable because Daddy's going down. He's got nothing. And when he dies, she's not going to inherit anything but debt.
There is nothing in that will that's any good.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Well, you need to get a trademark on the Trump's No Mussolini slogan that you just mentioned earlier when you were on the phone with Paul S. Ryan.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid this is indeed the new Republican playbook. He's a bit too dim to be an autocrat, but he's definitely shown, paved the road, shown this is how it's done right here.
Yeah,
I'm too stupid to do this.
Yeah, I agree. He is showing the next guy how to do it. And that is, I think, the greatest danger to our republic. August, thanks for the call. Colleen in Manorville, New York. Hey, Colleen, what's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Tom. Always good to speak to you. And, one of the things that with all of the callers that have called in, and the gentleman, Rudy, who just spoke earlier, I so agree with him on many levels. But one of the things that I've wondered is with all of these calls for his tax returns, he asked for the President of the United States, President Obama, to show his birth certificate. And he was doing this for years.
Sure.
He kept saying he wasn't a legitimate president because he didn't show his birth certificate. Not that any other person who had run for or been president had ever had to do that.
Right.
And you have a precedent of these people showing their tax returns, and yet Donald Trump doesn't want to do that. And I know that a lot of this is circus for him. You know, it's a lot of distraction, and, you know, if he just keeps talking and he keeps you engaged over here, you're not looking over there. But what my question is, or not my question, but my opinion is, you know, why is it that he's not being asked to legally produce, and there was no legal precedent for President Obama to produce his birth certificate?
Right.
It just shocks me.
Right. No, it was just a racist scam. I mean, this was Donald Trump saying he's the other, right? He's not like us. And, you know, of course, he was talking to white people, and you know, I think all the white racists in America knew exactly what Donald Trump was saying. But you're absolutely right, Colleen. If Trump can call for Obama's birth certificate, for which there's not even a precedent, then, you know, every president since Richard Nixon has, every presidential candidate, in fact, since Richard Nixon has put forward their taxes. Certainly, he should be revealing his taxes. Colleen, well said. Thank you. Ehan in Dallas, Texas. Am I saying your name right?
Eon.
Ehan, what's up?
On.
Oh, Eon. Okay, what's up?
Yes. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
I am glad that there are some humans left like you in the planet.
Well, thank you,
You have
Eon.
no idea.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered if God is actually putting you all to a test?
If God is putting who to a test?
All of you to a test.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not a big fan of an anthropomorphic God that makes those kinds of decisions, but I do think that history is putting us to a test.
But you believe in consciousness, right?
I do.
And a higher consciousness.
I do.
And the higher consciousness allows you to create a law based on a conscience, because Constitution derives from having a conscience. So practically everything, all roads lead to Rome, like all rivers go to the ocean. What you're facing right now is a reality of your truth. Your truth is that we all are working for a lie. Right now, I'm watching you on a medium that is called Free Speech TV. You know what the negative side is going to use? It's going to use that weapon against you. I'm watching you on a channel that promotes democracy. When democracy is an injustice to this land, especially this land was a gift to us.
Okay, no, this land was not a gift to us. This land was stolen from Native Americans by us. Ehan, thank you for the call. Steve in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
Hey, so I was listening earlier, and if I understand the magnitude of debt that Donald Trump is in, the bright side is, well, not necessarily the bright side, but just another way of looking at it is we elected our first slave to the Oval Office, and he's so wholly owned.
As in debt slave?
Right. Yeah. So, and then I had an exercise. What I'm going to be doing today is I read this book by Andrew Lichtman, The Case for Impeachment.
Yeah.
And
we had him on the show.
I remember. And one of the points he emphasized was that what moved Congress was the outpouring of support. I mean, the outpouring from the people. So the cards, the letters and the phone calls that they made. So, today I know people are just, in the habit of just emailing or using Twitter and everything. But that's so easily dismissed. I just had this dream that if we could, put a Mother's Day card in the mail on Friday to Nancy Pelosi, and with a nice message with a P.S. simply to impeach Donald Trump. If we could get
Sweet idea, Steve.
A couple million cards that would just consume the Postal Service,
yeah,
and land in Washington D.C. on the same day or around the same time, that would be something that she could use at the appropriate time to make the decision that she needs to make to impeach.
That's a great idea.
Because I'm all for impeachment.
Okay, me too. Steve, thank you. That's brilliant. Thanks so much for the call. It's 47 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day in just a few minutes. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the sane among us, speaking the truths that, multinational corporations would really rather you didn't know all about.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
The place where despair is not an option. We'll be back. And welcome back. Oliver in Benton Harbor, Michigan. Hey, Oliver, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, I had a wild thought. What if there's some sort of evidence of a double cross with a deal and some of the nefarious people that he's worked with in the past, and he's really worried about them finding out?
So you're thinking that maybe at some point Trump ripped off or stole from or deceived or defrauded some oligarch who comes from a country where when you get on the wrong side of them, they send people out with bone saws?
Yeah, or maybe, another European country of some sort.
Or just some, garden variety mobster in New York City that he was, there's stories out there that he built Trump Tower with concrete rather than steel because, he was in deep with the biggest concrete supplier of the city who was a mobster. If I'm remembering the details of that right, and I'm probably not, but it was some variation on that. I think it was David K. Johnston was writing about that.
Yeah, like Garden State variety.
Yeah.
I think they should go ahead and impeach him, even if they can't win. We could get an idea just who wants to throw their hat in with him, and come 2020, vote those people out right along with him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you, Oliver. Thank you for the call. Bob in Lakewood, New York. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks. I wanted to continue with you were talking about whether the House had the Sergeant of Arms had the authority to arrest. I happen to locate an article, a brief paragraph in Salon, and they record the article from the Atlantic. And there's a gentleman by the name of Russell Berman. And he says, should they choose, members of Congress can arrest Barr for failing to comply with a congressional subpoena. As Berman notes, the courts have granted both the House and the Senate authority to enforce their orders by imprisoning those who violate them.
Right.
Literally. And order the Sergeant of Arms to take violators into custody. In 1821, the Supreme Court ruled that Congress has the inherent authority to arrest witnesses for failing to comply with law.
No, I'm with you, and Congress reaffirmed that in 1935, but it's been, I think the last time Congress actually had anybody arrested was probably during the founding generation. It was probably pre-Civil War.
Right.
I mean, they don't even have a
Right.
holding cell there anymore. And and by the way, back in the 1820s, there was no such thing as the Secret Service, that was protecting the president and the rest of the executive branch. I don't think the Capitol Police or the Sergeant at Arms would get, could even get into Bill Barr's office, much less haul him off in handcuffs.
Well,
although it would be
maybe they ought to
great
give it a
theater to
shot.
see them try.
Yeah, they ought to give them a shot because this has really got to stop somewhere. Somebody has to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Bob. This is something that's really interesting. I mean, you've got Elijah Cummings now talking about inherent contempt. Elijah Cummings is a committee chairman, and inherent contempt is something that literally goes back to the founding generation, was reaffirmed in the 1930s, but nobody has talked about in my lifetime. I have no recollection of any conversation of this. I mean, maybe it's happened and I'm just unaware of it, but pulling some of this old dusty stuff out and going after the Republicans with it, the Democrats, in my opinion, need to start playing hardball. They really do. We'll be right back. We put together the coolest little newsletter every single day, or every single weekday, every day that we do our show. And Sue Nethercutt is the editor of it, and she does such a brilliant job with this thing. It's absolutely free, by the way. It's, all you have to do is go over to thomhartmann.com and just sign up for it. Sign up for the free newsletter. And we don't sell the list or share it or any of that kind of stuff. So, it's just coming to you, and that's it. And every day, as we're doing the show, Sue is listening to the show, and she is finding the websites for all the articles and all the stories and all the topics, broadly speaking, that I'm talking about on radio and on TV. And then she puts the links in there. We call it Sue's Daily Stack, and it's literally a link to every article that I've referenced and every broad topic that I've talked about. I think you'll find it really a valuable asset, particularly to help you win the water cooler wars. So be sure to check it out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. It's free. It's our newsletter. Thanks a lot.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And welcome back. We're talking about, well, we've got all kinds of stuff on the table today. Belinda in Detroit. Hey, Belinda, what's on your mind? Belinda, listening on Sirius XM in Detroit? Okay. Belinda's on line 7, Joyce, if you want to find out what's going on there. Neil in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Hey, Neil, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about, and thanks for taking my call. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this impeachment.
Sure.
I think Elizabeth Warren is correct. I think he should be impeached now, even if there's not much of a chance in the Senate. They ought to go ahead and try, and they also ought to impeach Barr. And one of the major reasons that I think that they should do this is because he's messing with some economic handles right now with regard to our nation that I think are very dangerous, including the Fed, including, trying to set some tariffs that I think are going to be very dangerous to our economy.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'm ambivalent about the tariffs. We had tariffs in this country from 1791 until largely until the late 1990s. And I would argue that they helped our economy, that they strengthened our economy. But that's a whole completely separate argument. I agree with you that the way he's pushing the Fed to keep interest rates down, to not stop quantitative easing, all these things, and this massive, borrow and give to the billionaires tax break. I think that
exactly.
I think all these things are extremely destructive. I'm with you, Neil. Thank you. Troy in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, Troy, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good.
A quick scenario. I want you to give me your opinion. So right now, Trump's taxes are it's not national treasure. They're in a building somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is the difference between the Democrats and Republicans. If it was the Republicans, they would take a group of people down to the office where the taxes are located, ask who's in charge, and say, I want, say, President Obama's taxes right now. If they said no, they would say, arrest him. And if they didn't, they would say, okay, who's next in charge? Now I want the taxes, and keep arresting people until they did it.
Yeah.
But we go and we ask for the taxes, and when they say no, well, I guess we're going to have to take them to court to get it. Meanwhile, we would arrest them and let them sue us for arresting them. So the problem I have is the fight that we have as far as our party is getting so spineless that I'm willing to really now vote out anybody who's not willing to fight for democracy, because that's kind of what's at stake.
I get what you're saying, Troy, and I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but the reality is that if you want to win in court, or even if you want to win in the court of public opinion, you have to be able to honestly say, we tried everything. We tried everything, and these people wouldn't put up with even the most reasonable stuff, even the most cautious stuff. They wouldn't put up with it. And that's what Jerry Nadler is doing right now, and I think he's doing it the right way. Every bone in my body wants it to happen faster, but, politically speaking, and Troy, thank you for the call, politically speaking, it may even be a good thing if there's a month or 3 or 4 delay here so that this stuff really hits the fan as we're going into the election season. You may have some political advantage. But I honestly don't think that Nadler and these guys are playing this for politics. I think that they're just trying to, step by step by step, walking through it. And let's hope that they succeed. Thanks so much for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires you. So please get out there, get active, tag you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
We are reading today from the Mueller report. This is from page 22, part 1 of the Mueller report. They're talking about the IRA, the Internet Research Agency, the troll farm in St. Petersburg owned by a Russian oligarch. In certain cases, the IRA created accounts that mimicked real U.S. organizations. For example, one IRA-controlled Twitter account, @10_GOP, purported to be connected to the Tennessee Republican Party. More commonly, the IRA created accounts in the names of fictitious U.S. organizations and grassroots groups and used these accounts to pose as anti-immigration groups, Tea Party activists, Black Lives Matter protesters, and other U.S. social and political activists. The IRA closely monitored the activity of its social media accounts. Redacted. And then we go to page 23. The first half of that entire page is redacted. By February 2016, internal IRA documents referred to support for the Trump campaign and opposition to candidate Clinton. For example, redacted, directions to IRA operators, redacted, quote, main idea, use any opportunity to criticize Hillary Clinton and the rest, except Sanders and Trump, we support them, end quote. Redacted. The focus of the U.S. presidential campaign continued through 2016. In redacted, 2016 internal redacted, reviewing the IRA-controlled Facebook group Secured Borders, the author criticized the, quote, lower numbers of posts dedicated to criticizing Hillary Clinton, end quote, and reminded the Facebook specialist, quote, it is imperative to intensely criticize Hillary Clinton. IRA employees also acknowledged that their work focused on influencing the U.S. presidential elections. Then most of the rest of that page is redacted. Number 3, U.S. operations through Facebook. Many IRA operations use Facebook accounts created and operated by its specialists. IRA Facebook groups active during the 2016 campaign covered a range of political issues and included purported conservative groups with names such as Being Patriotic, Stop All Immigrants, Secured Borders, and Tea Party News. Purported black social justice groups, Black Matters, Blacktivist, and Don't Shoot Us, LGBTQ groups, LGBT United, and religious groups, United Muslims of America. Throughout 2016, IRA accounts published an increasing number of materials supporting the Trump campaign and opposing the Clinton campaign. For example, on May 31st, 2016, the operational account Matt Skiber, S-K-I-B-E-R, began to privately message dozens of pro-Trump Facebook groups asking them to help plan a pro-Trump rally near the Trump Tower. To reach larger U.S. audiences, the IRA purchased advertisements from Facebook that promoted the IRA groups on the news feeds of U.S. audience members. According to Facebook, the IRA purchased over 3,500 advertisements, expenditures totaling approximately $100,000. During the U.S. presidential campaign, many IRA-purchased advertisements explicitly supported or opposed a presidential candidate or promoted U.S. rallies organized by the IRA. As early as March 2016, the IRA purchased advertisements that overtly opposed the Clinton campaign. For example, on March 18, 2016, the IRA purchased an advertisement depicting candidate Clinton with a caption that read, in part, quote, if one day God lets this liar enter the White House as a president, that day would be a real national tragedy, end quote. Similarly, on April 6, 2016, the IRA purchased advertisements for its account Black Matters calling for a flash mob of U.S. persons to, quote, take a photo with hashtag Hillary Clinton for President 2016 or hashtag No Hillary 2016, end quote. IRA purchased advertisements featuring Clinton were, with very few exceptions, negative. IRA purchased advertisements referencing candidate Trump largely supported his campaign. The first known IRA advertisement explicitly endorsing the Trump campaign was purchased on April 19, 2016. The IRA bought an advertisement for its Instagram account, Tea Party News, asking U.S. persons to help them make, quote, a patriotic team of young Trump supporters, end quote, by uploading photos with the hashtag #KidsForTrump. In subsequent months, the IRA purchased dozens of advertisements supporting the Trump campaign, predominantly through the Facebook groups Being Patriotic, Stop All Invaders, and Secured Borders. Collectively, the IRA's social media accounts reached tens of millions of U.S. persons Individual IRA social media accounts attracted hundreds of thousands of followers. For example, at the time they were deactivated by Facebook in mid-2017, the IRA's United Muslims of America Facebook group had over 300,000 followers. The Don't Shoot Us Facebook group had over 250,000 followers. The Being Patriotic Facebook group had over 200,000 followers. And the Secured Borders Facebook group had over 130,000 followers. According to Facebook, in total, the IRA-controlled accounts made over 80,000 posts before their deactivation in August 2017. And these posts reached at least 29 million U.S. persons and, quote, may have reached an estimated 126 million people. A number of IRA employees assigned to the translator department, number 4, U.S. operations through Twitter. A number of IRA employees assigned to the translator department served as Twitter specialists. The IRA's Twitter operations involved 2 strategies. First, IRA specialists operated certain Twitter accounts to create individual USA personas, and then there's a bunch that's redacted. Separately, the IRA operated a network of automated Twitter accounts, commonly referred to as a bot network, that enabled the IRA to amplify existing content on Twitter. The next part is individualized accounts, and there's a big chunk of it there that is blacked out and redacted. Let's see here. Continuing on. The IRA, or this is page 27 now, the IRA operated individualized Twitter accounts similar to the operation of its Facebook accounts by continuously posting original content to the accounts while also communicating with U.S. Twitter users directly through public tweeting or Twitter's private messaging. The IRA used many of these accounts to attempt to influence U.S. audiences on the election. Individualized accounts, well, we'll continue that tomorrow. It's the Mueller report.